Good evening, everyone. It is 5:31, so let's go ahead and get started so we are on time. Welcome to the March 11th meeting of the Animal Wellbeing Commission. This meeting is now called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll to establish a quorum?
Yes, Chair. Commissioners, please unmute your microphones. Commissioner Treat,
Present.
Commissioner Verga,
Present.
Commissioner Hayes,
Present.
Commissioner Budagon is absent, Commissioner Bell,
Here.
Commissioner Benedict,
Here.
Vice Chair Bagley,
Here.
Commissioner Christie,
Here.
Commissioner Asquith,
Here.
Commissioner Few is absent, Commissioner Morris,
Here.
Commissioner Garcia,
Here.
and Chair McDowell.
Here.
Thank you. We have quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to remind members of the public in the chamber that if you'd like to speak on an agenda item, please turn in a speaker slip before the item begins. After the item is called, we will no longer accept speaker slips, and you will have 2 minutes, which will be on the clock, to speak once you're called on. So we'll now proceed with today's agenda. So please rise if you're able to for the opening acknowledgement in honor of Sacramento's indigenous people and tribal lands. I'm going to ask Commissioner Hayes to read it for us.
To the original people of this land, To the original people of this land, the Nisenan people, the Southern Maidu Valley and Plains Miwok, Patwin, Wintun peoples, and the people of the Wilton Rancheria, Sacramento's only federally recognized tribe. May we acknowledge and honor the native people who came before us and still walk beside us today on these ancestral lands by choosing to gather today in the active practice of acknowledgement and appreciation for Sacramento's indigenous people's history, contribution, and lives.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we do have a new commissioner today that we'd like to allow you to introduce yourself and welcome you to the Animal Wellness Commission.
Thank you. My name is Shannon Asquith, and I have extensive experience doing lots of different things in animal welfare, volunteering, and working both at a local and national level. And I'm really excited to be back serving Front Street. I was actually the first paid, city-paid volunteer coordinator back in 2003 to 2006. So super excited to sort of be home.
Welcome. All right. Moving on. Next is approval of the consent calendar. Clerk, are there any members of the public who wish to speak on the consent calendar?
I don't have any speaker slips for this item.
Okay, thank you. Are there any commissioners who wish to speak on this item? Commissioner Morris.
I don't know what's going on.
Commissioner Morris.
Thank you. It's sort of a question of process. If we want to add things to the follow-up log, do we separate the log from the minutes? Do we add things now? What is the process? I can't.
Are you looking to correct things that are entered or add additional items?
Add additional items.
Those go at the end of the agenda,
Okay.
at items not currently on the agenda?
So items to add to the follow-up log go at the
Correct.
end.
Yeah, after the discussion calendar, commissioner comments, ideas, and questions.
Follow-up log. Okay. Thank you. How to turn it off? I'm back on. I'm on. You on?
Commissioner Morris or Garcia?
Hi.
Hi.
Another question on the follow-up log. There's a lot on here. If you kind of look at this, if you're putting 1 to 2 items per meeting, that's going to be a ton of meetings. Some of these things don't necessarily need to be on an agenda. There are things that maybe folks can do on the outside and kind of bring back to the meeting. The biannual meetings that I think Member Treat wants to do, maybe folks can kind of work on that and bring that back. This follow-up log is getting huge, and I'm not even sure city staff will know what the priorities are and how they're going to agendize that when we only have one agenda item tonight, albeit that's a good thing because it's a really big one. It's kind of daunting to look at this. And maybe we can refine it a little bit, combine a couple of the topics that may go together so that we can actually kind of attack this monster.
I actually have a question. Some of these items on here, it seems like they could be removed and resolved. Is there is that a process we just do in between meetings, or is there something that needs to occur here for that to happen?
Yeah, so the best way to do that then is when we're making recommendations of things to add to the follow-up log, we can also make recommendations for things that no longer belong on the follow-up log and think if there's action taken or there's then that would be a good time probably to make those changes or to suggest those changes.
Okay, so we'll remember that then. Okay, good. It's too much.
Commissioner Verga?
I think my mic's unmuted. I don't think that Ms. Bagley's legal presentation is on the follow-up blog, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Am I missing it though? Maybe.
That does appear that it's not listed.
Okay. So that.
No, that was that she had suggested intake laws or laws that pertain to the shelter.
Yes.
Yes, go. That would be a correction.
Yes, I had asked that the cruelty presentation be dropped, but I wanted the shelter law presentation still to be on the follow-up law.
And I did have something that I noticed here, just for clarification, if nobody's waiting.
We can make the correction about adding back shelter law. Commissioner Verga?
So I understand what Kathy was saying about there's a lot of stuff on here. And I guess what I was wondering, like some of these things could maybe be on the work plan. And I guess we can discuss that, like for instance, a subcommittee on SOPs and spay neuter and various things. And I don't know if that's the time to discuss it now, but I see that, for instance, one of the things here, it says cat euthanasia list. And I didn't necessarily want that to be an agenda item. I just wondered why the cat euthanasia list, my understanding is it's not going out anymore. So I don't know if that's something that we could just ask and have answered, or what the process would be there.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know if you have a thought on that.
So I have a question to Mr. Vanderlinden. Not everything on the log need come forward as a presentation. It is possible to kind of rectify the log, for instance, through a kind of departmental memo to the commissioners, I would assume. Or is that not the case?
Follow-up log is like flexible. So I mean, if there are changes that need to be made between now and a future meeting, then I believe changes will be made to the follow-up log by staff to mirror the recommendations of people on the commission or the changes that they think ought to be made. I don't know if it would require specifically an internal memorandum or anything of that nature.
Okay. That's for the listing on the log, but for the actual response to the item on the log, could that be transmitted in a manner other than a presentation or a discussion at the commission?
Oh, I believe so, yeah. So providing a brief, I don't think there's any restriction under the Brown Act for staff being able to brief commissioners on specific topics of interest, as long as we, follow the requirements of the Brown Act. I think that would be fine.
So in this specific instance of the cat euthanasia list, a response could be provided via a memorandum from staff as an example without necessarily necessitating a staff presentation or discussion.
Yeah, it would just depend on the nature of the item, and it would depend on kind of what the follow-up log contains as far as a recommendation, whether there was a requested staff presentation or whether there was
Understood.
requested memorandum of that kind, or if there's no recommendation, that also flexibly respond to any particular item. Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
I would just like to say that it seems like some of these questions are pretty simple questions that we could have answered while we're here, but I don't know, how that might work. If that would be the comments for at the end of the agenda, commissioner comments and questions, I don't know.
So I would defer to council on it with respect to, I think there probably could be answers to questions in in manager comments, et cetera. It just could not be a discussion item per se.
I apologize. IT was telling me about my new microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Can you please repeat the question?
The question, let's use cat euthanasia list as an example. If that is a straightforward response, a question of fact that staff could respond to, in theory, it could be responded to in the meeting, not even, for instance, under perhaps my comments, et cetera, and not require memoranda or anything else, as long as it does not become a discussion item.
Right, yeah, I think that would be appropriate, yeah.
All right, are there any other comments from the commissioners regarding the consent calendar, which would include the minutes from last month and the follow-up log? So any corrections on the follow-up log, now would be the time. Not new items, but any corrections on anything currently listed. Commissioner Morris.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, because it seemed like the presentation from Commissioner Bagley had been rewritten, so I was curious what's incorrect in the statement that's here in the log, just to get us, the first page of the log, it's the 10th row, they're not numbered, but it says redemption policy, applicable law, and spay-neuter incentivization. Vice Chair Bagley requested.
That's a totally different thing.
Okay, what is the other that you would be doing?
Talking about overall shelter law and what's legal in California as well as the city codes.
So we probably just revise this to say,
No, this would be a separate item. This is a discussion regarding the first and second and subsequent redemptions and returns to owner that
Okay.
require spay and neuter sometimes, or other times when we can incentivize spay and neuter. Shelter law presentation, current law in California and in the codes is a totally different thing that was dropped off this follow-up log.
okay,
Had previously been on there as a cruelty presentation.
yeah,
And I'm,
we've dropped the cruelty presentation, but, okay, thank you for clarifying. I was just curious about the difference between what was here and what the idea is, so, thank you.
Commissioner Garcia?
Okay, so if we wanted to, some of the things removed off of here, because some of them are clearly just informational things that don't need to be discussed. One of the questions on here was about Kitten Connection. We got a little bit of information on that today. And does that suffice as part as not having a discussion? When we do this at the end of the meeting, it's not really a discussion item. How do we remove things or request things be moved, or someone volunteers to just take that on and get some of that information for us, just to kind of thin this out a little bit?
Sounded like from council that we removed those at the end. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that would be the appropriate time for it.
Do you have to vote on each one, or?
No, I don't think there would be a vote that would be required in this particular instance. It's just like making a recommendation for the follow-up log, making a recommendation to remove something, I imagine would work the same way.
So are we going to go like line item by line item? There's so many of them. I can see a handful.
I would suggest when we get to that point that, like, commissioners just propose
Okay.
which ones, like, for example, I can tell you personally, I would suggest that additional spay-neuters events, shelter manager report in advance, and pre-COVID capacity all be removed.
Yep.
Because they were actually just questions and didn't necessarily have to go on the log.
Right.
But they're there, so we can, at the end, and I would suggest if anyone opposes removing something, that's when you can speak up, and if it needs to be, there needs to be a vote to keep something on, because there is a difference of opinions, then we could do a vote. But other than that, I defer to council, but it doesn't seem like a vote
That's what I was
would
wondering,
be
if someone
necessary.
had an opposition to it being removed. It's kind of under comments, so. Okay.
Do you mind if I just jump in quick? So I think that if the idea is someone on the commission would like an item to be taken off the follow-up log, I think then they would make that recommendation during that portion of the agenda. And if someone disagrees, to avoid it becoming a discussion item at that point, we just probably leave it on the follow-up log.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's any disagreement about removing it.
Okay.
Commissioner Benedict.
Yeah, mine is just a quick, actually, just a request. If we could get this numbered, it'd be really helpful. And the second thing is if we could get some sort of prioritization, too. If we could prioritize, like some things are more.
I know we had discussed that at the previous meeting. Council was to get back to us on if there would be a way to vote or somehow to figure out how, so all commissioners can have a say in putting these in priority order.
So my understanding is that first, staff is paying attention to recommendations on the follow-up log and your recommendations of priority. As far as, like, if commissioners identify a high priority item, then they would identify that as such on the follow-up log. My understanding is that staff is currently formulating different ways, and again, I'm not sort of privy to these discussions, but to come to an understanding of what the high priority items are for the commission, so that they can then use that in combination with the follow-up log to set future agendas.
So we're working on how to identify, but if any, I would suggest if any commissioner here has a really burning desire of something that is a high priority, bring it up at the end when we're in discussion, and so we can and discuss that. And if, somebody has some differing opinion, certainly feel free to bring it, but, it would be good for this, commissioners to identify, because it is an extensive list, where your heart and passion lives.
Thank you.
Manager Jessa.
Sure. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think perhaps during that portion, Ryan can speak of some of the different mechanisms. I don't know if we resolve, for instance, whether we could poll the members to see how they would kind of rank things, et cetera, to look at it at that point. That way there's both, everyone is aware of it, but there's anonymity as well as kind of an opportunity to every commissioner to speak up on their specific priorities.
Any other comments on the consent calendar? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved. I'll second.
All in favor, and we're doing oral votes, so if you please speak up. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. All right, we're now going to proceed to the discussion calendar. All right, first on our agenda is a discussion of methods to promote adoption or rescue of senior animals and animals at risk of euthanasia. Manager Jasso, I did have a question for you, because it states on here recommendation is review and comment. I know this commission has stated previously that there was interest in formulating a recommendation for the city council and bringing it forward. With it stating review and comment versus recommendation, is this commission still able to make a recommendation to city council?
So my understanding is it is possible. I would once again ask kind of Mr. van der Linden to speak to that. But it is fundamentally a review and comment with respect. The comment is to staff specifically in this meeting, but it is possible to convey that to the city council as well.
Yeah, so formally, because this agenda item is for review and comment, there would be no action taken on this item in this meeting. And I think the reason for that is because if I had to guess, review and comment is for allowing a discussion to take place where we can see if there's any sort of consensus or if there are diverging opinions on this particular topic, to give us kind of a forum for debate and discussion at this time. And then at that point, that recommendation would be clear to staff, who would then add it as a future agenda item for making a recommendation, where we would vote on a recommendation, or this commission would vote on a recommendation to be sent to PNPE and then to city council. And I think the reason is because staff wouldn't really be in a position to presuppose what the recommendation of the commission would be before adding it to the agenda and before having a debate. So the idea is the debate and the discussion happens first. That's review and comment. And then at a future meeting, we add that as an agenda item where it would be listing the recommendation and then saying that the recommended action would be to forward a recommendation to PNPE at that point. It could also include if there are diverging opinions that come out of the review and comment today and the discussion today. It could be set up in sort of a way where it says recommended action would be to make a recommendation to city council, and then it would have options of what that essentially represent what those diverging opinions would be, at which point the commission would then be able to decide on which recommendation they would like to make.
So just for clarification, so this commission does not formulate our own recommendation. It's formulated by staff based on discussion?
Well, this commission does formulate its own recommendations, especially with respect to the annual report that's made to City Council. That's the primary way for making recommendations. But outside of the annual report mechanism, this falls under other recommendations in the City of Sacramento Council Rules of Procedure. And with those other recommendations, essentially, you are coordinating with city staff in order to bring that recommendation outside of that annual report recommendation. So then staff would bring it back, and if you disagree with that recommendation, you are not under any obligation to make that recommendation, and you can tell staff that you would prefer a different recommendation to come before the commission.
Okay.
But you're under no obligation to simply accept whatever recommendation staff puts before you. The choice is ultimately with the commission.
Commissioner Verga.
So I've got a few questions regarding this language here, review and comment. Everything that you were just talking about, is that a new procedure here as it pertains to commissions?
No.
'Cause I've never heard it in the 5 years that I've been coming to these meetings before.
Yeah, so that's not a new rule. This is part of just the procedures for advisory commissions as they've existed. Yeah.
And another question, the recommendation, review and comment, who makes that decision for that to be on this agenda?
Staff.
Okay, so staff, that's Front Street, or that's the clerk, or that's all of the above? Can you clarify, please, who makes that decision for language, review and comment?
So staff at Animal Care Services specifically and Community Development who formulate the agenda would decide that recommended action as it is stated on the agenda.
Gotcha. So, Mr. Jasso, are you aware of the meaning of this language here? And did you approve of this language? Review and comment versus review and make a motion?
So I think the challenge, and I think Mr. Vanderlinden hit this nail on the head, is at this point in time, staff doesn't know what a recommended action is because it has not been discussed at this dais, and that will happen tonight. So our task then is, based on the discussion that has happened, to translate that, or at least certainly kind of properly convey that to a kind of recommendation. Perhaps the recommendation is clear. There's unanimity on this dais as to what it wants to bring forward. Our task then would be to bring that forward in another meeting for a vote by this body that gets transmitted, as Mr. Vanderlinden was saying, to PP&E and ultimately to City Council. So at this point, it is a review and comment because of the fact that we as staff do not know where this commission sits as a whole or individually on the topic in front of us. So we would, but to be clear, across commissions, including the City Council, review and comment is common terminology.
I understand that that's common terminology, but again, I'd like to read the purpose of this commission, because I want the commissioners to understand why this language is a problem, okay? And so it says, the commission is established for the purpose of providing advice and recommendations to the City Council on strategies, policies, and programs designed to ensure and enhance animal care services. Now, oftentimes I've seen on these agendas, it says review, discuss, and make a motion. And I think this language is intentional, that it says review and comment, not make a motion. And I'm just wondering why. Because it sounds like you're saying we have to have, first of all, this is the first agenda item this year that we've been able, from the follow-up blog, that has been on the agenda. Last month, there was none. And now you're telling us that we can't make a motion, we can't have a discussion, make a motion and vote. I mean, isn't the making the motion and voting as a body as to what the language should be, the process?
My understanding of rules, so I don't think anything that Mr. Vanderlinden and Carson, I'm just going to call you Carson for ease of discussion, precludes the ability of this body to recommend and ultimately consummate in a motion on this. But at this point in time, we as staff would not know what that motion is to put it on the agenda to suggest a vote on that motion at this point in time. We will, presumably, hopefully, after this discussion, kind of have that ability to do so. So I think you can assist me if I'm characterizing the situation correctly in terms of our normal rules and procedures.
So wait, just to summarize, it sounds like if this commission were to come to a consensus tonight, we could formulate a recommendation and vote.
No, so the review and I'm sorry?
Would be at the next meeting, correct?
Yes, so the review and comment would be tonight, so that would be the debate and the discussion on the topic. Then if there is a consensus, as you said, and let's say everyone in the commission agrees on like one particular policy, and we don't have any other recommended policies being brought up, at that point, staff would be able to make it an agenda item for the next meeting, and it would be agendized as including the recommended action being to make a recommendation, to make a motion to recommend this to City Council. And if there are diverging opinions, we could split it so that it's the same agenda item, but there are two different options for the kinds of recommendation we could make at that point, and or it could increase depending on how many different diverging opinions there are. And that would be the way to do it, because then it would be an agendized item with that recommended action, and that would be in compliance with the Brown Act. As of right now, because the agenda is only review and comment, specifically so we can get that debate and discussion and hopefully consensus on this policy matter, there wouldn't be an action to take. And so it would have to be at the next meeting or when it's agendized in the future.
Okay, Commissioner Morris?
So just a little bit of orientation. Historically, at least since I've been on the commission for 3 years, recommendations have gone in the annual report. They haven't gone one at a time in piecemeal, so to speak. They've gone as a summary to annual report. Could be different, but that's sort of how it's functioned previously. I also want to say the idea of promoting animals who may be at risk is an idea that actually I think Kathy and I at least talked about after we toured Stanislaus and saw some work that they were doing to promote animals. So I'm supportive of promoting animals at risk. I'm just saying I'm not sure if that is a thing that goes to city council, or is that a recommendation within our relationship with the staff at the shelter or with Mr. Jasso, to whom shelter reports up, is my understanding. It's sort of like the brochure. We talked about translating brochures. This didn't go to city council. It was work that the commission forwarded and worked with staff at the shelter to initiate. Once we all said, yeah, it's a good idea, let's do it. So I think we could dialogue about how to promote at-risk animals and recommend that to shelter colleagues and not necessarily have to wait till it goes to city council. I mean, ultimately, as it seems to me, they report up a chain of command, and so going with that.
Manager Jasso?
Sorry, I'm muted. No, I think that's correct. Not everything, in the sense of recommendation might come out of this body that staff is absolutely in agreement with and embraces. And so presumably there would be no need to go to city council or because it would be something that's adopted by the policy, by the shelter and by management, myself, all the way up through the city manager. And so it really depends on the nature of what is the dialogue, what is the topic in question here. We were simply responding to the specific example here of how things move up. And if I can give you an example, for instance, we are currently in the budget process as the city. We present to city council, we're going through a series of presentations where we are presenting for review and comment the city's budget in pieces. The council is not voting on that budget during at these presentations. They will come forward and ultimately vote on that budget based on those various discussions that are taking place. So it's a parallel here. Once again, with this being on the agenda, not knowing the position of this body, we could not express that in a to adopt a motion to recommend or approve. So that's where we're at right now. And I will make a commitment here in the sense of that depending on where this body is, we will accurately portray those recommendations or splits in recommendations as they may be. So.
Commissioner Benedict, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for that. I was just wondering if, since we're, since this, like say, for example, the final plea is open for a review and comment, would it be a stretch if we were also to come to an agreement and make a motion and also vote on it? Since, why do we have to push it to the next week if we, if we can actually get something done here tonight, something as simple as final plea, which is going to save lives, like right off the top.
Sorry, I'm getting used to my microphone. So I'm just kind of explaining the way that a recommendation outside of the annual report, like how that would snake through to coming to PNPE at this point. So the idea would be to make a motion when it is agendized with an actionable motion that can be made. So that would end up being to have it go the next, when it is agendized, not at this particular meeting. I also want to say, in respect to what Commissioner Morris said, is that if there is a willingness between the commission and staff to cooperate on a specific matter, it may not need to have a formal motion or go before the city council or P&P at all. It just depends on, what the nature of that agreement and cooperation would look like, and it depends on the issue. Another thing that I think I forgot to mention when I was kind of explaining this process before, but I think is important, is that doing it this way with review and comment first and then a motion in a future meeting is also to allow the public to kind of hear the debate and the discussion as it happens, and then be able to provide their own input at a future meeting and gather their thoughts and then provide their opinions and ideas at a future meeting where we're set to actually make the recommendation, so we get final input from the public before we make any recommendation.
And by the way, I did want to let the public know there are a lot of new commissioners, so we're learning and feeling our way, and we appreciate your tolerance to this discussion of the weeds. Sorry. Commissioner Verga.
I just want to make a point of order that I think that in light of, in particular, of Mr. Hinderman's comments at the last meeting, in which he clearly indicated that the change to the agenda-setting protocols was because he was essentially retaliating against commissioners who he felt had undermined Front Street in the past. And that was a very clear public statement that he made on the record. And so I have grave concerns that this language here, which was optional language, was intentionally placed there so that we could not make a motion and vote on this. And if you, again, look at the purpose of this commission, it is precisely to do that. It's not to have an agendized discussion. We're talking about the Brown Act here. There are members of the public who can speak to this agenda item right now. They can engage and ask questions. And it just seems rather suspicious, in my opinion, that this language is put in here. And Leah was talking about that couldn't we all come to agreement with shelter staff? We have tried to get the shelter staff to implement this program, a final plea that Bradshaw has implemented successfully, and many other shelters have implemented successfully for a very long time. And he made it clear on this dais that he called it advertising and he had no interest in doing it. Further, the email that Ryan sent out made clear, please don't do this, in my opinion, that it was very clear that he is reluctant to be implementing any program like this. And so look, we all have busy lives. We have families, we have jobs, we have a lot of different obligations, and we come here to help animals. That is, at the end of the day, I'd like to think why everybody is here. And when we finally get something on the agenda that's a discussion item that ideally we could be taking a motion on and voting, then we're told we can't. Oh, we have to discuss it further, and then we'll come back that the staff will put language together, and then we're going to come back and discuss it further. That just quite frankly sounds like nonsense to me, to be honest with you. And I for one, I'd like to table this item until we get clear on how all this agenda setting stuff works, because we're finding out new and different things all the time. And again, what I asked last time, I said, has the law changed? What has changed that the follow-up log's different? What has changed that the process and procedure has so significantly changed this year? And I think Ryan gave us that answer last time. Would you agree?
Oh.
Well, I was not at the last meeting, so I can't agree or disagree kind of with respect to it. I will only tell you that in my role sitting here representing the city manager, I'm open to any conversation, and that doesn't mean that shelter staff may not have a different professional view with respect to it, which we will, as kind of management, would be attentive to, as we will to the deliberations of this commission.
My understanding, though, is that our goal isn't to agree with.
Point of order.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Commissioner
Understand.
Treat, did you remove yourself?
Well, I took myself off it real quickly. Am I the only one that didn't see the report for this committee before it went to city council? I never saw it. Yes. Well, it wasn't. Well, it was printed afterwards, but I mean, when it went to city council, I didn't get a copy of it.
The annual report for 2025 was presented and adopted here in November of last year.
Oh, and I missed the November
2025.
meeting. So, okay, so if you miss a meeting, you don't see the report. Okay.
It was in the packet. It was published in the November packet. And
And it was
I just
discussed?
remember Commissioner Bagley moved it.
Madam Chair, was discussed?
She wasn't on
I
the
wasn't chair at the
commission in
time.
November.
But being present at the meeting, yes, it was discussed. Yeah. And then the 2026 work plan, the previous chair entered for this year blank. So that does remind me, as we have discussions about different items, to recommend to the commissioners to think about things that you would like to do, like projects related to different items in the shelter that, so we can add things into that work plan, because right now it was gifted to us this year blank, so we do need to try and
Madam Chair, I stand
get some
corrected.
items on there.
It was the 26 one that I didn't see, so it was just blank?
The 2026 work plan was blank,
Okay,
yes.
25 I saw was 26.
Yes, yeah. Commissioner Morse.
So I'm curious about the attachment that was with this item, because I am hoping that we can actually discuss what it is we would like to see. And that's where I'm getting lost in, we're having quite a bit of back and forth about process, but I do know, for example, that one of the ideas that we wondered about was, for example, a screen at the shelter reception area that said, hey, look at Fluffy. Fluffy is an at-risk dog.
There is a presentation if
Yeah.
we get,
So can we move, can we have that and then we could do the discussion, or is Brian doing that discussion, or whom? I know there was an attachment, so that's where I was like,
Yeah.
let's get into it.
Commissioner Benedict?
Yes, I guess I just have another question, because you had mentioned that if the discussion happens here, then the shelter staff goes back, and they then bring it back next month. What if what if our recommendation or our comments are incorrect? Does that go another month? Or can we just talk about it and maybe come up with some changes or recommendations next month? Or, we'll just keep kicking this down the road? How does that work?
From our perspective, I think we would certainly be endeavoring to encapsulate the right language that comes out of here in terms of the recommendations, observations of this commission, and bring that forward. I would think that if we incorrectly catch it, I would think there's an opportunity to correct it and still kind of move on the item. I would defer to Carson once again on that.
I mean, as far as if there is a discussion regarding a draft agenda, I mean, it would largely be up to staff and, chair and vice chair or commission members to coordinate on what the wording of the recommendation would be. But again, that's up to individual commission members and staff to kind of coordinate those efforts.
So just to clarify, we have a discussion today, some concession or consensus comes out, staff would then try to formulate it into a recommendation, bring it back to the meeting next month, and then this commission could then modify it as we normally do for other things.
I believe so. I think what I was kind of referring to was prior to, but again, that would be up to staff and commissioners to kind of coordinate.
Okay. And then Commissioner Verga.
I would just like to go on record as saying that I think it's important that we have a discussion today and that there's a motion and a vote. And I'd like assurance from Mr. Jasso that, you know, there's a point to this. In other words, that this commission will be heard, and that whatever that motion is or whatever we come up with here is not going to be significantly changed, because as we've seen, we're not even setting that agenda. The commission isn't. The Front Street staff is doing that. And so I'm just wondering what the point of this commission, of us all being here, is if it's just going to be changed.
I can give you my assurance that we will endeavor to accurately portray the discussion, et cetera. As to the fine point that you made that there would be a vote tonight, I do not necessarily believe that's possible, but I would defer to counsel on that.
There cannot be a motion and vote taken tonight because the recommended action was to review and comment. So there cannot be a motion.
Then who's going to decide what language is considered by staff from this discussion?
So it sounds like we have a discussion. If this commission comes up with a consensus, then we can state the consensus, but apparently not as a motion, for it to come back to us next month and allow for public comment.
Yes, that's correct. That is my understanding. And I apologize if it seems clunky to do it in that way. I'm just trying to express what the proper procedure would be so that the commission is able to express its recommendation to City Council as is allowed in the ordinance and the council rules of procedure.
Carson, one point of clarity. A public comment is allowable tonight on this item. It would be in the context of just the discussion at the next, whenever it comes forward as whether there's a precise recommendation of this body, et cetera, there would also be that opportunity for public comment at that point.
Yes.
Commissioner Verga.
Well, I'd really like to call for an adjournment because I think this is, quite frankly, outrageous that this kind of conduct keeps happening. But I will defer to the commission if they would like to discuss this.
And then we can talk about language amongst this commission that we think might.
So first, for clarification, point of order, is that a motion to adjourn? Or will you allow the presentation and discussion?
We can have the discussion, as futile as it may be.
Commissioner Morris, did you have anything else besides you want to hear
Just
the
if we
presentation?
could move to the presentation, and then we could talk about what an at-risk program looks like. Thank you.
Okay. And again, public, thank you so much for your forbearance in this discussion. All right, so, Ryan, are you making the presentation? All right. Yes. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Van der Linden, would it be acceptable for me to read a short portion of the email that I sent to the commission in briefing for this item?
Yeah, if it's in the same subject matter as your presentation.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify, I feel like my email was mischaracterized somewhat. I just want to, express that, in the briefing materials to kind of prepare us to have the most efficient conversation possible. Obviously, the shelter is not already doing these programs, so I wanted you to have, background information on why that is so that you could, prepare and do research and so we could have, the most balanced conversation possible. And so I did, provide some initial concerns, but I also just want to point out that I said, that said, I also recognize that potential benefits exist, referencing this style of marketing, and I'm open to hearing your ideas and possibly experimenting with a version of this type of marketing that balances the risks and the benefits. My hope is for us to have a balanced discussion that fairly weighs both the pros and cons of these methods so we can assess what would lead to the best outcomes for animals. So I wanted to clear that up. So just a little bit of context, because I think we need it. I think we need a little bit of a reset here, is that there are a lot of different methods that a shelter can use, whether it's for adoptions or getting more animals back home or addressing the spay-neuter crisis. There's probably hundreds of different methodologies a shelter can use, and many have sort of changed over the years. The goal, my personal goal, and I think the goal of the shelter overall, is to use the methodologies that are going to lead to the most animals helped and the least animals suffering. And at least from my perspective, there's no dogmatic attachment. I want to know, and I want to get to the truth, and that's why I'm excited about this commission, eager to get talking about these things, to get down to the truth of what's going to help animals the most. And no method that we discuss here this year is going to be perfect. There's going to be pros and cons to just about everything. Every action has some sort of consequence, both positive and negative. And so just as kind of a foundation, I just want to say that if the shelter is doing a certain method, it's because we feel that the pros outweigh the cons for animals for that method. If we're not using a method, it's because, at least currently, we feel that the cons outweigh the pros. Oh, this goes to my last presentation. This isn't this presentation. So if we're not doing something, it's because we feel that the cons outweigh the pros for animal welfare. So it's still coming from that place of caring for animals, just from a different perspective. Now, when it comes to this topic, historically, how we felt, at least shelter leadership, and myself as the marketing lead over the last decade, has been that this methodology, at least our prediction, would do more harm to animals than good. And so my goal in my presentation here is to give you, as much information from the shelter side, from my experience, as possible, so that you can make a recommendation to council. But as Assistant City Manager Michael Jasso said, and the commitment I'll make is that the shelter, as long as we can have, good, healthy dialogue, is always open to new information and to change in our mind. I'm kind of a scientific person, and with science, you never just commit to something. You always are open to new information, and for that to be wrong. So I want to put that out there. And so, what I can say to you, and kind of why I included the briefing materials with the pros and cons chart, is at least personally how to change my mind, and I think, others at the shelter, is using the strongest evidence possible, show that the pros outweigh the cons for a method, and demonstrate that that method is feasible within budgetary, staffing, and other sorts of restrictions. So I'll give our shelter's stance on this, but I do want to, present the pros of this idea. I think it's really important anytime you have a disagreement with someone is to acknowledge the good things about their ideas. There are rarely disagreements where there are not great points on the other person's side, right? So I just want to acknowledge that what are the pros of, this type of marketing where, euthanasia dates or euthanasia risk is really kind of put out there. In front of the public as a marketing tool. Pros is it could motivate someone to choose a dog that is at risk instead of another dog. I know that was brought up, I think, when Commissioner Benedict, when you were talking about the kennel sign method. It could save a life that otherwise wouldn't have been saved, and it may make it more likely for rescues to pull that animal. This has been a point that's brought up that I think is a good point, because they might see it in an email, but with social media, if they're being tagged, they're seeing the photos, it's more powerful messaging, and there is a certain degree possibly of social pressure on that rescue to to step in and help that dog. So I just want to recognize that there are pros to these ideas. So as far as concerns that we've had and that other shelters have as well, not all shelters, as I mentioned in my email, there's a pretty big split here. But one is projected effectiveness. So a lot of shelters, we met with Bradshaw Animal Shelter about their final plea program in advance of this meeting, and one of they had mentioned that I think just about all the dogs that had been on final plea had either been adopted or rescued. And so one of the things that I asked them is have you kind of done any research to determine if that was correlation? So for example, you post them and then a certain period of time after they get adopted or rescued, or was it causation? Did the person who adopted that dog or did the rescue, did you follow up to that where they said, yes, that method, be it a kennel sign or a final plea, or a section of the website, I think has also been brought up. Did they take that dog because of that method? And we actually looked at this. They said they hadn't done that. They hadn't done that research. We did this research with our social media about 3 years ago. We posted 37 dogs that were either hard to adopt or medium difficulty to adopt, and I can get into what that means if you're interested. But essentially, we did really high quality posts for 37 of these dogs. They weren't, this dog will be euthanized posts, but they were posts that were, really trying to convey the great things about this dog. There were some really high effort videos done as well. Only 1 out of the 37 of those dogs was adopted because of the Facebook post, or the Instagram post. So we followed up with every single adopter. We called them and we said, where did you first see this dog? Vast majority was, they saw them on the website or they saw them at the shelter. And I could do a presentation on that study sometime if you're interested. So that is one thing to consider is perhaps, putting the red sirens, putting the date, maybe that would make a huge difference, possibly. And so that's kind of what we're open to kind of talking about there. But I do just want to point out that shelters fall in different camps here. So for us, we tend to focus mostly on like our adoption events as a life-saving tool, and that's kind of where we put our urgency and sort of our life-saving messaging. We don't use euthanasia, but we say, hey, we really need your help to save lives. It's sort of alluded to in an indirect way. Other shelters, Stanislaus, for example, I know they have like a volunteer page as well, is very, very forward about the euthanasia as a means of marketing. Then you kind of have Bradshaw that's sort of in the middle. The way that they word things, I think, is actually probably the best I've seen it done of this style of marketing. I think I've seen it done in a way that I think could really turn a lot of people off, but I think theirs is kind of middle of the road. So we all do things a bit differently. I just want to point out, in 2025, Front Street's dog live release rate, 86%. Stanislaus live release rate for dogs, 86%. Bradshaw's live release rate for dogs, 86%. So I just want to set kind of the efficacy aspect of this to say that this, we might do something, and every life saved is important. I want to make that clear. But this may not revolutionize what we're doing. All shelters seem to be facing these major plateaus and major hurdles, and there may be other things that could be even more effective that we could, talk about and kind of put time into. So that being said, the other thing is that it could harm what does work, and especially for those hard to adopt dogs. What I've seen work over the last 10 years is just giving enough time for the right person to come in. Our outward marketing to like our Facebook page, almost all of those folks, they know about us, they've known about us for years. Many have adopted from us, our most loyal followers, they have animals. It's the people who often come to us, the 40 to 70,000 website visitors that come to the shelter every year, the thousands of in-person visitors that come to the shelter every year. Those are the people who are in the market coming to us. And so my concern is that this style of marketing, depending on how it's done, and I'm open to discussing that, and the magnitude of which it's done, could deter those general adoptions, resulting in less adoptions, which puts more pressure, which creates more crowding, more illness, more stress on those animals whose mental health leads them to having these behavior problems that lead to adoptability issues. And so that is one of the concerns. And one of the things I hope everyone had a chance to watch, at least those sections of the webinar that I sent, is that the study that was done on California adopters found that, let's see, I have it here. It was about 50, basically of the people who did not adopt from shelters, about half the number one reason, 50% of them said the reason they haven't visited or adopted is because they had fear that it would be a bad experience for them, specifically referencing sadness and euthanasia concerns as the reason for not visiting those shelters and not adopting. So that is kind of the concern is, we've done a great job as an industry, and credit Sarah McLaughlin to convey to the public that there is an urgent need for life saving. That's already out there. What this study is saying is that we need to focus on the other messaging and not turn off those and capitalize on this untapped market. Again, going back to that plateau, how can we get the people who are not adopting to choose sheltering first? And one of the concerns that we have is this sort of messaging is, according to this data, going to turn people off from coming in to visit. And then another thing is, as I mentioned, our adoption events. those are our number one life-saving tool, and I think Front Street perhaps has done these, better than many. I can show you videos. It's not as good now that the Facebook algorithms have changed and local pages aren't being promoted as much, but man, we used to get hundreds of people in line around the block to adopt when we were in crisis and when we were at risk of euthanasia for space. That is still a very effective tool for us. And the reason it's effective is because we use that urgent messaging and we don't overuse it. We use it only when we need to, and so those audiences that are seeing these posts, they're not getting, desensitized by this, right? It's like you hear a joke multiple times, you get more and more desensitized to it, it stops having that same reaction, and that reaction is what causes people to literally click the reactions and to share, which gets that messaging in front of many more people. So if we're, let's say, every week doing these posts like, these dogs urgently need to get out, these dogs urgently need to get out, and then we hit a time where we need an adoption event, and we say, we are completely full, there's an urgent need for adoptions, we're waiving adoption fees, my concern is that that could become less effective, and that tool is the most important life-saving tool when we get full. One single post can get dozens and dozens of dogs adopted, and that's often when those hard-to-place dogs finally do get adopted because there's finally a bigger supply than there is demand, so people are actually considering these harder-to-adopt dogs. So I'm very protective of the adoption events because I know that they are our number one life-saving tool when we get into trouble. So some context there. And then very last thing is just, adopting for the wrong reason. We've had these sorts of posts come up, on social media. Other people have posted these dogs. This dog will be, euthanized on this date, or worse words than that used. And people have come down knowing nothing about the dog, being totally unprepared. We've had to deny a lot of adoptions, at least for the people who are honest with us about their home environment. A lot of the dogs that could be at risk have behavior issues that could potentially be a safety issue if it's not managed in the right home. And we've even seen dogs that have been adopted from us in these situations, later seeing them trying to be rehomed on social media by people who took them because they had concerns about the euthanasia. So that would be the last reason. So that is kind of the perspective from the shelter. I know many of you have experience in other areas. I'm very open to hearing it, very open to talking about how we can experiment with this. We've already had some initial conversations about this already. So I'll turn it over to the commission to hear your thoughts, answer questions.
Thank you. Clerk, are there any members of the public that wish to speak?
I have no speaker slips for this item.
All right, thank you. All right, we have a healthy list of commissioners who would like to speak. Commissioner Bagley or Christie?
It's actually me. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. I just want to appreciate the data and the research that you're bringing into this, because obviously it's one of the most emotional topics that we cover, short of the euthanasia conversation. And, I think our emotions can steer us wrong, or we might assume that everyone's feeling the same emotions that we are when we see an animal that's in jeopardy. But that data and the research that is done to promote healthy outcomes for animals, and so I want to trust the intention there. And I think this is a great way for us to have this conversation. I totally see that there are people that are not going to want to come to Front Street if they know that the perception there, or if they think the perception of that shelter is that there's a lot of euthanasia. Like, some people just cannot handle that. And then there's other people, probably a lot of us, that are more drawn to a place like that because we want to do more and have a bigger impact. Maybe there's little baby steps that we could consider. So to not deter anyone from coming on site, maybe we start with just an on-site thing, like the kennel sign idea. That's not going to deter people from arriving because they've already arrived, and maybe we have a little underdog paw print that's just denoting an animal that maybe stands less of a chance of being adopted. And then just one other note is I've seen discussion from some of the experts in the field that one tactic that can help the at-risk dogs is identifying those candidates early on in their process. So like right at intake, there are certain demographics of animals that are just going to have a harder time, like The very young, large breed male dogs tend to have a harder time. So maybe those guys get labeled as an underdog before they're urgent, and maybe that affords them more of an opportunity. So just a couple thoughts.
Thank you. Commissioner Morris?
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan, for the information that you provided. I agree with Commissioner Christie that it's helpful to have the detail. I'm going to separate a couple of questions. One is just this table. I got a little confused by the table. And part of my confusion was, so for example, the third column, evidence that would be helpful to evaluate cons, a small scale study, and then the very far evidence to evaluate pros, a small scale study. Are you proposing doing a study, or is there a study?
What I meant there is that we're sort of, there's a lot of kind of predictions that we're making, right? Like I have a lot of fears, right? That may not, that there isn't currently that I'm aware of data to, support or refute, right? So for example, if there was a shelter and it was a well-designed study, and in the pros there, so it can motivate someone to choose a dog that is at risk instead of another dog. So if there was a shelter that had a certain program that was using a certain method, and basically every time a dog got adopted and they said, hey, did this dog get adopted because of this kennel sign? And they said, look, we've put signs, this year we put signs on 100 dogs, 30 of them, the adopters said they adopted because of this sign. I would be all over that.
Again, I'm sorry, are you proposing a study, or is there a study?
There is not study, so it would be helpful.
You're proposing a study.
Would be helpful if it existed, if someone could find one, or if perhaps, we could design our own in some way, or perhaps if you guys wanted to create some sort of project working with another shelter to collect that sort of data. Essentially, we have blind spots where we need more information to really know if these pros and cons are even real or justified.
So what I think I'm hearing is that there aren't specific studies that tell us whether this is a positive or not a positive. What we have is a study that says half of people avoid going to a shelter because they don't want to be made sad, right, or they don't want to hear distressing info.
Right.
So there's not really a study to support one or the other. So
yeah,
we
there's
could potentially test something. Maybe I like the underdog idea, or I know Commissioner Hayes has had a couple conversations with the folks at Bradshaw about their program. I mean, maybe we could do a modified Bradshaw type method, or do some sort of our own study with the underdog idea. Would that be helpful to the world of animal care if we actually did a study of some sort?
Yeah, I think that would be great. I mean, I can't commit at this time. I would need to talk to my staff about it. But I am interested in, like I say, like everyone at the shelter, including myself, wants to save the most lives possible. That's why we're in this this very difficult work. And so we have these concerns, but we really need. I recognize that my opinions. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence on here, right? Stronger evidence would help us make a more informed decision, right? If I know, hey, we can. There's evidence that says, hey, if we do this, we're going to get these benefits, and you know what? There actually aren't these risks that we had fear. This actually isn't going to harm animals the way that we feared that it would. I'm all about it. So that's the point of this column is saying, hey, this would be really helpful information for us to have to see if these pros are truly pros and if these cons are truly cons, just so we get more in touch with reality.
So just what I'm hearing is the shelter may be open to, say, a couple commissioners on a project, let's start off with just designing something to go on the kennels, and start collecting data of how successful that is, just laying it out there that it could be a potential project for people.
Wait a while.
Commissioner Hayes.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan, for all the information. I know I've talked about this sort of thing for a little bit now, and I've met with you and to talk about this. So one question, so is your hindrance to even moving forward with something like this just that piece of data? You want to know, when you met with the Bradshaw folks, if people are adopting or rescues are pulling animals because of the final plea. Was that your one roadblock to kind of seeing the effectiveness of it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think one is the upside side of it, and one is the downside side of it. So it'd be really helpful to see, okay, we're doing these methods, and they're working, and it's not just correlation. It's like we know that they're working, but also we know that they're not causing these other downsides, right? Because I could see a situation where maybe they do 30 dogs, and 5 of those get adopted because of the method. I would still have some concerns that method, that's 5 dogs adopted, that's amazing. I would still have some concerns that depending on the frequency and the way that the wording is done, that it could perhaps reduce effectiveness of our adoption events, which save dozens of dogs, you know what I mean? So I'm trying to, it's balancing the risks and really trying to figure out what methodology is gonna lead to the most animals helped with all things considered. But that would be extremely helpful.
And did you hear when you were meeting with the Bradshaw folks that this has hurt their adoption rates or that this has created downfalls?
I haven't asked that. I didn't ask that. I'm sure they would if they were, blatantly aware of it. The hard part is it's really hard to kind of prove a negative in a sense. Like it's hard to say, unless it was like a massive drop or something like that. So we'd have to kind of figure out. It would have to be well designed for us to figure out what the criteria is for is it hurting adoptions or not. But it's a hard kind of experiment to formulate. So I might need more discussion on that.
Okay. I did engage with Sarah from Bradshaw and Annette a little bit, and they did not point out downsides. They did not immediately say adoptions have dropped or these posts have hurt dogs, or in fact their adoptions have gone up and the posts in the social media and the response to their social media has stayed the same. You guys use social media very well. A lot of your volunteers use it very well. People who foster use it very well. And we wouldn't be posting any dogs on social media if there was no response to that. Then there would be no point, unless to just show off your cute animal. I'm very interested in doing a pilot program. I know your resources are burdened and short in some regard, but to not even attempt to do something without, because I will make a commitment to find the evidence and the results from what's happening at Bradshaw to relieve you of some of your tasks. If there's not even an attempt to try something, whether that be something on the kennel door, although maybe just me being a younger person, social media is where I see a lot of response with animals in general getting rescued or pulled or adopted. Then we kind of hit the end of the road if we're not even going to try, let's say, a pilot program. To even use, maybe we can model the language that Bradshaw is using, because it is not abrasive, it is not sad, it is a very much like final plea. They don't even use the word euthanasia. They've never once said the word euthanasia on their posts. I've looked at every single one that they've posted. So they walk a very fine line without deterring people away from their shelter. And you could argue desensitization all you want, but lack of awareness is worse. And being closed off to the even knowledge that there's a dog out there that has, one more day to go or one more week to go, because all they say is final plea needs to be pulled by 3/17 or 2/5. So a pilot program, even trying this for a month or 2 months, to just maybe once a week you post a dog. That is something that I'm very much in favor of. I don't know what anyone else has to say about that.
I think that's reasonable. That's something that our public information coordinator and I discussed, that even if it's something short term, it's unlikely that anything catastrophic or irreversible is going to happen. If it's over a short term, and so it's something that we're open to. We need to have more discussion with staff to kind of talk about that language and what that would look like. But
because if we do the pilot program, then a couple of us, or I would be more than willing to help look at the effectiveness of that, although I do not work at the shelter, analyzing those results of a pilot program to then see how do we move forward.
Right, yeah, and I think that would be best. I mean, I think when it comes to like this research, obviously, all of us probably have some preconceived idea of what we might, expect to see. So there is potentially a little bit of researcher bias there, but I think if we, collaborate on it and we were to, kind of come up with how people would be asked about this, for example, like we were very careful in how we asked to not lead the question, for example, when we did our study. I think that could be good. So I would welcome that, that partnership if we're able to create some sort of pilot like that. Yeah.
Commissioner Asquith?
I am new to, obviously it's my first meeting, so I have a couple of questions first, and then I'd like to make some comments. Does Front Street have a list of rescue groups that they traditionally contact when animals are at risk? And if so, how many of those rescues are feline and canine? And are they regularly contacted when animals are at risk? And then I have one more question.
Yeah, I mean, we have a rescue, list of rescues that we work with, and we have a regular rescue email that goes out. That may be veering off of the discussion item a bit, but the basic answer, yes.
Animals at risk. So that's related to animals at risk. And how many are on the list?
I'm not aware of how many are on the list right now.
Okay, that would be good information, both felines and canines, because I'm a cat person as well. And then does Front Street utilize transports? Again, this is recognizing animals at risk or final plea for animals to be moved to other parts of the country from Front Street that have fewer animals.
Yes, we've made many a road trip up to Oregon Humane in the last year. We've done flights over the years. We work with places in the Bay Area that'll come and pull animals. But yeah, we've done transports.
You know how many have been done in the last 12 months?
How many transports? I don't have that data handy.
Okay, so part of my past experience, I was the shelter manager at. I worked for Animal Care and Control for 2 years, from 2017 to 2019. I was the manager of the Downey Animal Shelter. Los Angeles County is the largest animal shelter in the country, and they have 7 shelters, and it's geographically a very, very big area. When I was there, I started and we managed and led a program called, we called it Length of Stay. And it was a length of stay meeting that we had every Friday. And that length of stay meeting had shelter leadership, either myself or my second in command, a veterinarian, one of our 2 vets, behavior, the rescue foster coordinator, and both field leadership and kennel leadership. And we met every Friday. And we talked about our guys that had been there for a while, and whatever the time frame was, and what we were doing for each one of those animals. And we were looking at making plans for each one of those animals based on behavior, based on medical, based on the kennel experience, based on the rescue and foster opportunities. So we worked collaboratively every Friday and said, God, what about this? What about that? How about this? The et cetera, et cetera. And that was not only successful for us to look at the best outcomes, but it was also an opportunity for leadership and for kennel staff to collaborate and work together as a team. And then we reached out to Foster's adoption partners, is what we call them, our adoption partners at LA County. So that was successful in bringing down, I have some stats, bringing down days in kennel, bringing up live release rates, and us working together as a team. We enlisted help of volunteers and things like that and so forth. So and similar to the plea process from Bradshaw. So we obviously, and the reason we had field staff there, we obviously would not be placing dogs that had bad behavior into poor homes. So the dogs that might need a little bit more work, the cats that might be sick, always went to the rescue groups because they are the ones that know how to handle those animals. So what we found, we did final pleas, and we had they're still using this basic process today. Because I was on the social media earlier today with watching the rescue coordinator who was there when I was there, and I just saw her. She got 6 old dogs out to frosted faces, and they all had their videos when they were leaving, and I had to text her, and she's like, I miss you. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. But I guess what I'm offering is to maybe think in those terms. And I am still in contact with my LA County folks. My predecessor is still there. They are still using this type of holistic process. And so I would be willing to be part of a team that maybe looked at something like this, tried something like this. And I'll leave you with, as the manager, I also had to sit in the big chair. And so when people came and said, XYZ, this dog, why was this dog euthanized? What happened to this dog? Well, we as a team knew we knew we had worked through all the options. And if I had to say it was because of this or it was because of that, I had to do that, or one of my other leadership team had to do that. But you have to stand behind every single one of your euthanasias as a manager, as a leader. And it's part of being in sheltering. And it's the part that's a bummer. But I've also been on the other side. And I remember when I was volunteering at Bradshaw way back in the day, and I left one night and I wanted that kitten. I really wanted that kitten. And I didn't tell Celeste. And then the next day, I called her and she said it's too late. And had I maybe known that cat had been on a final plea list. And I think members of the public may be feeling the same way. But there's a certain sense, I think, of transparency, and there's an opportunity to call in the community and say, yes, this happened, but we need your help. Can you become a volunteer? Can you sign up with this rescue? Can you help us transport? Can you do X, Y? Can you come and do laundry? That brings them into the fold and can make them part of the team to solve the problem. So that is, I would reach out to LA County. I will discuss with shelter staff. Any of those types of things, I'm happy to do.
I'd appreciate that. It sounds very similar to something we do called shelter rounds, which is a very similar process of evaluation and a Teams channel that includes all staff to be able to chime in, and there's many layers of approval when it comes to that. So, but I would be very interested if you would want to kind of either write up kind of how it was done when you were there or how it currently is done, because maybe there's something that someone else is doing that we can implement that would, make us that little bit better. So, yeah, I'd appreciate that.
Commissioner Benedict.
Yes, thank you, Ryan, for the report. And I just want to say that I think that Commissioner Asquith has some really good ideas there from her experience. I would love to see that implemented where it's a collaborative type thing with the rescues, and me as a rescue, I do get these lists from, even though we're not technically a rescue, we're more of a transport, we do get the lists. And not all of them not all of them have a deadline. So that's another way that you can just say, or they don't say euthanasia, it just says deadline. So for the general public, it's not that scary if there's a deadline as opposed to youth date, right? It's one way to mitigate. Also, Commissioner Hayes, Hayes, I think I would be happy to join you in trying to do something there for the final plea. I think it's good. And also, Ryan, I think that, since you have such a great social media presence, and you said that you don't think you get a lot from that, but what you probably cannot quantify are the shares. Because you put it on there and maybe somebody sees it, but how many times have they shared it? And that's pretty hard to quantify. I think that by implementing something like that, or just saying that we shouldn't do it, probably doesn't serve the animals best. But I'm really excited that you're willing to consider putting the, just on the kennel signs. And we can make signs that are not real scary, for the public. But I think that most people, they know that the shelter, that these animals at risk are, they are going to either be adopted or to rescue, and they know that they may end up being euthanized. And about also, I wanted to comment about the certain dogs that, you know, you don't want them to go to people. Well, you do a vetting beforehand, right? So you would not send at-risk dogs that are dangerous to the general public. Those would go to rescue, right? So those are already kind of off the table. We're talking about adoptable friendlies that, you know, really deserve a chance at life, right? And I think this all comes back, if I must say, to SOPs. You know, if there was, like, for the final plea, if we had SOPs in place and adopted some SOPs, and maybe we can get together and put some of this together for the final plea, and a bunch of other things as well. But SOPs would really help this process, so they kind of go together.
I think there's some good points there, and something I'd be interested in, and again, I can't make any promises to what we're going to do. It's, again, I'm not the only decision maker at the shelter, right? I have to consider all staff and take in the expertise of other staff members. But some of you have kind of phrased things in certain ways that I haven't quite thought of before. I think as shelters, we're sort of used to the sort of what sticks in our minds is sort of the extremes of how this messaging has been done in the past. But what would be helpful is as you think of language or different ways to say these things or put these things or how the posts would be, feel free to send me drafts, send me your language, send me what you think would kind of convey the right things without, how can we hit the sweet spot of conveying the urgency, especially, one thing Bradshaw pointed out is that in many ways, these are almost the best function of these as tools for networkers, right? So how can we phrase things in a way that, cues the right people and kind of gets the job done without sort of turning off that untapped, 50% of people who haven't adopted, and the reason being they're afraid of euthanasia and sadness. How can we toe that line to get the best of both worlds? So feel free to, I think you all have my email at this point, so feel free to send me emails with your thoughts on language.
Commissioner Garcia?
Thanks, Ryan. I'm glad we're having this discussion. I mean, look at, in just the last half hour, some of the good ideas that have been kind of rallied back and forth here, and I know we've talked about it for a while, and I too agree, the language and the terminology doesn't have to be final plea or last day or any of that. It can be a little more modified, a little bit easier to take than some of the harsher things, which I think final plea sounds a little harsh to me. And also, like you said, evaluating some of those dogs that come in that from the beginning are going to be hard to place, the seniors, maybe the bigger dogs, maybe looking into something that's more modified around them. I've also thought of different things for seniors, like senior to senior programs, so maybe we don't run into that backlog of older dogs there that end up being at risk at a later date. So I think the conversation is good, and I think there's a lot of good ideas, taking like small steps, doing one thing, and seeing how that goes. We've seen multiple ways of doing this from different shelters and stuff. Like I said, there could be, the old timers, the old time crew, or something that makes it a little more appealing to folks coming in. Like some folks come in and think they want a puppy and end up going out with, 14-year-old dog. So just some things to think about and work around with that as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I agree about the discussion. And I just want to say that I know we've kind of had a rough start this year, both procedurally and conversationally, but I really do see a lot of value in this forum and in community advocates and in criticism and negative feedback when done in a constructive way. And I got to say, I've a lot of work. My head's kind of in the sand, just trying to keep my team afloat and my areas afloat. I don't always have the bandwidth to be like, let me see what this other shelter is doing, or what are these other ideas? And I come from a marketing background. You all come from a wide range of other backgrounds, experiences, talents. And so that excites me for two reasons. One is it's like I'm hearing things that fresh perspectives that I don't tend to hear from shelters. We can get very in any industry, you kind of get entrenched in your patterns. So having this outside fresh perspective is really valuable. And also, like I said, your talents, your experience. There's so many things that I would love to do if I had time. I've always said I would love to go on like a 6-month, would it be like a sabbatical, like a work break to just go to all the best performing shelters in the country and just spend a month at each one, just learning everything about what they do. There's so much that I'd like to do that I don't necessarily have the ability to do. And so that's where this commission is valuable to me, and especially that some of you are interested in collaborating and working on projects that we may not have the time to do is also exciting. So I just want to put that out there, that I'm optimistic about the commission, about the relationship. So thank you for those comments. And I know the chair and I had talked about, there is sort of two different topics here. There's sort of like the sort of euthanasia marketing final plea, and there's sort of promoting senior animals. So we didn't really announce it, but I think we were talking about starting with kind of the euthanasia-based sort of marketing, and then kind of focusing specifically on seniors. I don't want to leave that out. I know you've been waiting a long time for that. So yeah, let's be sure to come back to that.
Commissioner Morris.
Just to try to put some concrete structure on the table for some thought, and a bit to Commissioner Verga's idea about eventually are we going to actually have something to look at and support or not support. I'm not going to use the word vote on, but support. It seems like there's some people on the dais who have interest and have engaged in discussion. There could be, and I think the term is a work group, that at the moment I'm looking at Commissioner Hayes, Commissioner McDowell, Commissioner Asquith, and possibly myself, because we can't have more than 4, but I'm not sure about that number in terms of not getting to a quorum.
Quorum is 7.
She can't do it because that would, I think there's some rules about what the chair can or can't do, but if a couple of us, quote unquote, want to get together for coffee, so to speak, to put some structure of I'm just going to call it the underdog program and something else, but I hear Ryan saying we'll send him messages, but I think this group would like to do something a bit more clear of what we're talking about, and maybe design a pilot in collaboration with you and your team. And that pilot might be something that is, for example, a 6-month pilot, that we do things like come up with a kennel sign. I'm still sort of leaning on the signage in the front waiting area that says, these dogs are underdogs or something. Look at the ideas that Shannon had brought up at such a, so I'm just putting it out there that a couple of us could, quote unquote, have coffee and sort of design a pilot based on some of I know Commissioner Hayes and I have talked about this in terms of what Bradshaw's doing and Commissioner Asquith's good experience, so that we could bring to the next commission meeting sort of a pilot proposal. The background on this is some of the stuff we did on the wait while survey. And in fact, I'm wondering about adding the wait while survey, I think that's the right term, wait while, that we could add another question to that. Did you adopt this dog because it was an underdog or something like that, so we could get a little more info about whether this idea has legs. So I'm hoping we could maybe do something a little concrete where we have a few people who put their heads together with the team and come up with a pilot proposal.
Commissioner Verga?
So, Ryan, can you tell us what problems you had with Bradshaw's final plea program?
No problems specifically, other than the ones that are mentioned in this chart here. So there's not specific programs. The problems, the language used, I think, may need to be tweaked somewhat for our comfort level. But the main thing is that there is not currently evidence that hard evidence that's saying that these dogs that we put out with this type of messaging are getting adopted or rescued because of this method that they wouldn't have otherwise, right? So we want to make sure, because we did a similar study, and we talked about this when we met a couple of years ago, where just our more general social media promotions of individual dogs had a pretty low efficacy rate. Now that could change with the language change. That's possible, and I think that's what we would be very interested in measuring. But so one of my, I guess, issues, not with Bradshaw's program, but just this method in general, is that we have some fears about the risks, but we also don't have solid evidence that there's going to be a reward, right? So it's balancing those two things. It's hey, if this is really going to get animals out that wouldn't have otherwise, then maybe it's worth some of our adoption events having less traction. Maybe even if there are those cons, maybe that's worthwhile because it's working. And then on the other end, it's figuring out, like, is this type of messaging, reducing visitations or reducing adoptions or making adoption events less effective. So we just don't have, like, concrete evidence on either side that informs us.
Well, it sounds to me like the Bradshaw did indicate that they had very positive results from this.
They said that every dog that they had, I don't know if it was every single dog, but it was close to every dog that had been in the final plea program had been adopted. However, when we did our social media study of the 37 medium, like, difficulty and hard to adopt dogs, all of those dogs also got adopted, even though only one of them was adopted because of the post. So it is a sort of a correlation versus causation. So they're saying correlation. I would love to have data that says, no, this is causing this effect and it's worth the potential risks.
Okay, I've just got a couple more questions.
Sure.
So obviously not all the animals that are euthanized are on your rescue list, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so there's 1,823 animals that were killed that lost their lives at the shelter for a number of different reasons. And I guess one of the things that I know that happens a lot, and I've heard this from a lot of different people, and I think you made reference to it, and so did you, Shannon, is lack of awareness is worse than not knowing at all. And to go back in that next day and have your heart broken because that little kitten that you could have saved if you would have known what was going on lost its life. And I think, especially at Front Street, I can tell you this, that most of the animals that are dying, when we look at public records requests, are not those that are on the rescue list. And again, my question, and I think Shannon asked you too, is there even a rescue list that's going out for felines now?
So, thank you for bringing that up. I did want to point out, because I know this came up earlier on the follow-up log. For the cat, euthanasia list or rescue list, it says this item will be addressed in the FAQ for rescue-related questions described below. Below it says staff will provide the commission with a rescue process overview or FAQ for rescue-related questions via BCC email. So that's something that I'm currently working on. So that'll it isn't just a simple answer. So I want to make sure that one, it's thorough, it's accurate, it's in writing, so that you're able to reference back to it.
Well, I'm just going to tell you that I know numerous cat rescues that were getting your rescue list that are no longer getting it and have told me that it's no longer going out. So I think a yes or no wouldn't be that complicated either. And I guess the other thing is, I think, as Shannon pointed out, and I so agree, is for staff to know that everything was done that could possibly be done to save an animal before a healthy adoptable animal is killed is immeasurably better for any staff who care about animals. And I know that most of your staff do really care about animals and want to make sure that they're not dying unnecessarily. And I think on top of that, just to talk about the cost of euthanasia, the staffing costs, the euthanasia drugs, the rendering of the body, all those different costs, there is definitely a cost benefit to saving a life than to euthanizing an animal. And then I have a question for Mr. Jasso, because I know Ryan just got done saying something important. I think he said no promises, and it seems like we're pleading with Ryan to get him to agree to do what many other shelters do as a matter of course, okay? The final plea, like Bradshaw does it, voluntarily, and a lot of shelters do it voluntarily. Is it required that when we have all this discussion and we make, kind of a consensus decision or discussion, that Front Street agree with it? Because ultimately what this is about is sending it to the mayor and city council to decide. And I would imagine at that point, Front Street could weigh in, we could weigh in further if we wanted to. Isn't that what this is about? Let our city leaders decide.
Well, in this particular instance, I was going to say that actually wouldn't be necessary. I just leaned over to the chair to say that I hear a consensus conversation going on that, including agreement by the shelter, that doing a pilot, certainly for physical signage, but also probably for some form of virtual signage, seems like something doable and making sense. And so I can give you our commitment that, I want to ask staff of Front Street to work with a small body of this body to kind of see what that looks like in terms of that. So I was going to wait till the end, simply because I wanted to make sure I heard everyone's comments, but since you asked, I brought it up now.
Thank you.
And just for point of clarification, I clarified that a subcommittee or ad hoc committee is created under commissioner comments and not during this discussion. So, I know, by the way, Commissioner Hayes will be leaving early, but I was going to, at that point, ask that she chair the subcommittee on this. Only because she's leaving. It's an option, because she won't be here to say whether or not she would be willing to participate.
Just a point of order question. It's my understanding that if it's a formal ad hoc committee, then that has very strict rules tied to it and a final report due, et cetera, et cetera. If it's an informal work group, not appointed by the chair, it can happen a bit more quickly and somewhat organically, which I remember hearing in a presentation among city council members, not commission per se, but so there's a difference between an informal work group and an ad hoc committee. And so
I can jump in. That's correct. Ad hoc would be for a limited time with a limited purpose. For example, creating a proposal for a pilot program to be discussed, which is different than, as you mentioned, a couple of you getting coffee
meeting, which could be more expeditious and work with the team, the staff, as opposed to a formal report that then has to be produced of an ad hoc committee. Just a point of order.
Well, it just depends on how much invested these commissioners are on whether or not you want to do the bigger work or make it very informal. So.
I'd be more than happy to chair. It seems like an ad hoc committee would be more, I don't know, it'd be more right for this type of situation, but I could be wrong. But I'd be more than happy to lead the process and come up with, in collaboration, we can, model it off of Bradshaw or use your expertise, Shannon, and come up with something and then bring it back and also collaborate with you, Ryan.
But we can discuss under commissioner comments the actual formation of it. So, but moving on to next speaker. Commissioner Asquith.
I would like to share a very successful social media presence that is doing amazing things for the Lancaster Shelter for Los Angeles County. That is Rita_Earl_Blackwell. Rita has almost 130,000 followers. She's a professional photographer. She's also a trusted volunteer. So no paid staff are having to support any of the networking final plea work that she's doing. And the type of final plea work that she does is not, oh my gosh, come get this animal or it's going to die tomorrow. There's a variety of methods and ways that she's attracting folks from all over the state, all over the country too, to come to Lancaster, which is one of the most highest euthanasia rates in the state. So, and also somebody was talking about shares. She's got anywhere from 1,000 shares to 200 shares to on many of her posts. So this could be an example of a way that we could take advantage of successful networking for those final plea animals without impacting staff by engaging, again, the volunteers, they're in my heart, engaging trusted volunteers to work at that level.
That's great. I want to come back to that in just a second. Just before Commissioner Hayes leaves, I wanted to also say, because it kind of relates to this discussion, so that's probably 6 months ago we met. I know, so Commissioner Hayes was a big proponent of TikTok, which again, we weigh everything with pros and cons. Our concern with TikTok was that, it's great for getting a lot of likes, but we felt like it wasn't very locally based, which is what the strength of Facebook and Instagram to, share with friends and family to get people like physically in the shelter. And our content at the time, like our video content, was very much landscape focused. So it would have required sort of taking on a whole new platform and changing our process and making a whole new platform and maybe diluting our work from like Facebook and Instagram, which we know work well for us. So that was kind of the con of TikTok. But, our public information coordinator came to me and said, you know what, I think now might be the time because, she's kind of changed all of our video formats to vertical anyway. A lot of it would translate very well. So we are going to commit to kind of a pilot TikTok program as well. And thank you for sharing many examples of shelters using it successfly. So we're gonna, not invest. We're gonna kind of replicate content there for the most part, but and kind of see what kind of traction we get. We're gonna do some experimenting with adoption events only promoted on TikTok to see if we do get that local audience, and then continue to invest more time and more specialized time into it as we start to see results. I just wanted to thank you for that, and let you know we're going to be starting that very soon.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's funny. You're getting off TikTok. I've been 5 months without it, so.
Good for you.
Yeah, that's exciting. I'm happy to hear that and excited to see the results of that. So,
cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Coming back to the volunteer, yeah, we can definitely. I wrote down. You said it was Rita_Earl_Blackwell, right? Okay, so yeah, I can look into that. We do have, a team of volunteers who does, creates content on their own. They make some really good stuff. We have also looked, when we met with Bradshaw, they mentioned they have a separate kind of volunteer group that posts those dogs, and that might be an even better, not to say we wouldn't post it on our main page, but that might be an even better forum if rescues are trying to, specifically look for those dogs, maybe a slightly different audience, but to make it easy for that to happen. And we have been talking about, kind of organizing these volunteers a bit more, and kind of creating a volunteer group. It would be a big lift, for sure, to kind of oversee and make sure that, the messaging is cohesive and all that, but that is something we're talking about as well. So I don't know, sounds like kind of similar along the lines of what you were saying. Yeah.
It's statistics, research. She's been doing this for years, 7, 8 years. And if we wanted to maybe tap into her expertise, I know Lancaster's a long ways away, but if maybe we could jump online and she could share some of her tips and tricks.
Great, it's a great connection.
Commissioner Bagley.
Ryan, don't take this wrong, but I want to make sure we don't get too clinical about the proof of correlation, okay? I know you're a numbers person and you have a background in marketing. I think that the enthusiasm from Bradshaw is based on the fact that from January 2025, they had 139 dogs that they marketed in this way, and 130 went out the door. And I think the enthusiasm comes from just a reasonable presumption, because those dogs were in the kennels for weeks with no interest whatsoever from anyone, and then suddenly they put it on urgence, and someone came in and wanted the dog, or a rescue wanted to pull it. So I want to make sure that, I know I, for one, don't need a lot of proof of correlation. I think in a perfect world, we'd be able to ask everyone and solicit everyone after they've adopted one of these final plea dogs. But if we get into the weeds of it, it seems to me it's a pretty reasonable presumption when they've been in the kennels for weeks and all of a sudden they're out the door, okay? Also, let me cover this. I do think this is going to require a vote. Commissioner Morris, and I'll tell you why. Because we've had this, we've bantered it back and forth since August. I think that was when it was first brought up. The manager was absolutely adamant. He would oppose it. He'd bring in experts. He didn't want any advertising. He didn't want any of this urgent plea stuff. He was adamant. And then we've talked about it back and forth, but it's clear that the shelter has reservations, as you do, Ryan. Historically, you said they were somewhat discouraging or uninclined to just jump into this. For that reason, I think it's beyond a collaborative effort like the brochures were. I think that this would require a vote. If historically the shelter has been disinclined to take this on, it will require a vote and a recommendation from City Council is my thought on it.
Next is me. First, I want to thank Manager Jasso for the commitment from the city on trying out a pilot. Really appreciate that there's the thought to start investing that way. One thing I wasn't actually going to suggest is, to have a separate social media for rescues. Personally, I follow Rita. I follow a lot of social media folks that are out there advertising the animals that are most at risk that aren't, and probably not all the pages that I'm on are regular public. I will say my last, 5, 6 fosters were all from euthanasia lists, and putting it out there adds to that transparency on, especially to rescues or to your foster group of what animals are most at risk. I will say my last few are all down from the LA County where it's even a bigger disaster than up here. And my current ones are, I brought up a pair of brothers out of Apple Valley that were put on the euthanasia list. Apple Valley and give you typically, at least last year, was giving you 24-hour notice, so I ended up selecting and pulling them. I was watching 3 husky puppies, and because I pulled the 2 that I did, they euthanized the 3 huskies that same day, and they were not on the list. So it's that transparency could have changed. Did I take these 3 and try to find somebody to take these other 2? So that it does absolutely factor into which dogs rescues pull, which dogs people who are committed fosters may pull. So having that transparency and by all means, if we need to separate that social media and have just like a urgent social media list versus the, just on the general Front Street advertising, to really push to the rescues that we work with, to push, hopefully Front Street has a whole list of fosters that that you can kind of count on, especially when numbers get high, that marketing to them specifically and making very clear these are the dogs most at risk. I'm on the Front Street foster list. I get the emails that say, hey, we're high, the most recent one, any dog over 40 pounds. Well, I'm sure that the list of who is most at risk to be euthanized is a little more specific than any dog over 40 pounds. But that is what the foster list came out the other day. Might have even been today. So having that transparency, having the ability to really be able to make a more pointed choice of which animal you foster, it can only help the dogs most at risk.
That's a really good perspective.
Commissioner Benedict.
Yes, I want to also reiterate the transparency. I think it's just so important, as Chair McDowell said, for every animal, to have a chance and for the public to know what this animal is headed towards. And You know, I think with what Commissioner Asquith said, too, I want to, reiterate, too, because you mentioned again that 1 out of 37 from your post was adopted, because, I don't want you to get tied to that because you cannot quantify all the shares. Like with Rita Blackwell's, all of her shares are getting a lot of dogs adopted. And with the transparency, too, I think a lot of shelters don't even, well, what I would like to recommend, one thing I'd like to recommend is to have a sign on the door. I think a lot of people don't know that California has mostly kill shelters. If we just had a sign when you walk in the door that says, we are not a no-kill shelter. Again, for transparency, so people do know what these potential outcomes are for these dogs, I mean, everybody on this commission, I think everybody is an animal lover here, We're the Animal Wellbeing Commission. And that's the number one thing, is to look out and have a voice for these animals, and if we don't advertise for them, then we're not doing them justice, and we're not doing our jobs. So,
Yeah,
all I have.
and I think, again, transparency. Oh, absolutely.
Doing a time check. It is 7:27. If we want to continue this discussion, we will need to vote.
Yes, if you can do a voice vote on this if you'd like.
If you want to explain to our
Oh,
new
yes,
member.
sorry, Commissioner Asquith. Per the rules and procedures, commission meetings go for 2 hours. You can vote to extend 1 additional hour. You don't have to talk the whole hour. But if you do, then we can go until 8:30. But you have to do it before 7:30.
And if we don't, then we end promptly at 7:30. So is there a motion to extend? Motion to extend. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. I didn't hear a lot of voices. All in favor?
We're sleepy.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you very much. Okay, Ryan?
I don't know, lately I've learned that I'm kind of purposely dehydrating myself before these meetings. Everyone here seems to have an iron bladder. That must be one of the qualifications. Maybe we do want to put in a bathroom break at some point if it becomes too regular, although again, we're going to try to keep it to 2 hours going forward. But so yeah, I just want to say, like, again, transparency is a method for saving lives. I think that's why you're advocating for it. And there's different levels of transparency. There's even more transparent that we could go, more open into the realities of what goes on at the shelter. I guess my thought process is, if you knew that transparency would lead, the level of transparency we're talking about would lead to fewer lives saved, would you still advocate for it?
Commissioner Berga?
Just a couple procedural things about final plea that I think are important. Not all animals at Front Street oftentimes are available for the public to see, even though they may be available for public adoption. They may be in a quarantine unit that may be mama and puppies. They could be available for adoption, but they're not available to see. And I know what some shelters use, and I think it's a really good idea, is they have a board in the entry area and it could even be a QR code. I mean, there's a lot of simple things that you could do to show every animal that is on the euthanasia list and a little bit about them, because you've already got, which ties me into my next thing, okay? So, you have that area also, is that Chameleon, which is the software that all shelters use and that Front Street uses, can tie into 24-hour pet watch. It can tie into everything. The website, Front Street's website, and it's literally as simple as doing one program, changing the program in the field, and then you just click that box, and that can be included. Any animals that are at risk of euthanasia can be included. So that was just a procedural note that I had.
One thing I'll say about signs, I mean, again, we'll collaborate on that, but something that, as a customer service manager and my team are routinely facing is this reduction in people's ability and willingness to read. We've tried so many different signs for so many different things, and some of you may have experienced this in your industries. It's like, it was a sign, it was right there. You were standing in front of the shelter for this 15 minutes, you didn't see the sign. So, yeah, signage can be, you know, a difficult thing to make work. But again, that's why we can measure the progress, right?
All right. There are no more speakers on this topic. So I want to appreciate the very productive discussion. It sounds like the later part, we'll have an ad hoc committee forming out of this. And I appreciate the city's commitment to working with the commissioners and a trial. I don't know if there's any discussion or motion that needs to go to the city council, but I think at this point, it sounds like we were going to work together on trying.
So you have our commitment to work together on figuring out a pilot that makes sense and observe it. And I appreciate the comment about empirical evidence, like definitive empirical, may not be possible. So the questions I asked in a more general way of the shelter and so on is in the sense of, do we have a sense that it's hurting, or do we have a sense that it's helping, or kind of, and I think at the end of the day, we are all concerned with trying to save as many animals as possible. I'm an animal owner myself, and actually one of my animals is from Front Street, my dogs. So you have our commitment to work on that. As to, I will leave it to the commission during kind of discussion of items, whether an ad hoc committee makes more sense versus independent volunteers. And I would defer to our city attorney to maybe kind of, as well as our city clerk, to define the differences that may be possible in that kind of approach.
Commissioner Berga.
I just wanted to say why it's so disappointing that we can't take a motion and take a vote, which is what we should be doing here, in my opinion, and differs from what the agenda setting process should be, is that time is of the essence. You know, time is of the essence for every one of these animals that are dying every day. And then I hear that we're going to have a pilot program, and then we're going to do a study, and we're going to think about this, and we're going to think about that. Give me a break. You know, this is just basic, life-saving, fundamental things that can be done right now, today, tomorrow, to save lives. And that's why I get so upset. It's like, what's so complicated about that? You know, if you look at Bradshaw's numbers, it's like 100%, you know, life-saving. And so, Mr. Jasso, that's why we get upset. That's what we want to emphasize here. This needs to happen sooner than later, please.
Just for clarity, I agree. Number one, I did not say we need a study, and I don't believe we do need a study, although as we go through this pilot, I think that it's still good to gather data as much as data is available as we move forward. I think we are prepared to work with, you know, the members of the commission that are willing to work on this as soon as possible, whether the commission takes a vote kind of at a future meeting or not. So I just want to be clear about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think what we've kind of talked about is formulating some sort of a pilot program quickly, but within the context of that pilot program, tracking the data as we go. But that's not to say that we couldn't get additional information from other shelters that would also help reinforce a certain methodology as being beneficial and not possibly harmful.
Commissioner Benedict.
Yeah, I think that with or without a pilot program, we need to save animals' lives. That's just the bottom line. So my concern is that we won't have enough, or we won't be able to make a vote next time if we have to push this one more month. I would like for next month to be able to make a motion and take a vote on signage, website, and final plea. I want something that we can make a motion and take a vote on next month. Can we quantify that right now, that we will do that next month?
I think in order to make a motion for something, there has to be specific language that's included in the staff report. Is that right, Carson? That's part of our barrier.
I think
I have
my understanding of Commissioner Benedict's question, and you can let me know if I'm incorrect, is she's not requesting to take a motion on this item right now, but is instead requesting that at the next meeting, there be a motion and no further delay. Was that my understanding?
Well, that would be the maximum time to wait, but if we could just come up with some verbiage right now and make a motion and vote, we've got 40 minutes.
Well,
So you would be able to make a recommendation right now, but there would be no vote right now. The earliest the vote would be at the next one, but you are free to come up with a consensus recommendation right now to give to staff, who can then place it on an agenda item, as we discussed earlier.
And how do we go about doing that?
Can continue the discussion, and formulate your ideas about what you would like to see. If there's consensus, then the recommendation can be with respect to that singular policy or consensus. If there's multiple ideas, then that can potentially be included as well. But you are free to discuss and deliberate on what those ideas might look like.
Commissioner Bagley.
Well, you know the phrase I hear all the time when I talk to other shelters, the phrase is no-brainer. This is just something we should move forward on. Now, the language that we would like, Ryan, would be language about kennel cards, kennel marketing. I don't know if it's a red stripe that says urgent on it. I don't know. But I think that some of the commissioners have some ideas on some language. So that would be one aspect. Leah Morris brought up a board when you walk in that might identify those animals, and that would be something we could explore the language of. I'm sure we could informally finalize language and get it over to the shelter long before the next meeting so we could vote on this. And then, of course, the rest is social media, which we are all able to contribute to and have ideas on. So, I mean, those are the three things, Ryan, to think about. And if you need language from us, we will give it to you before the next meeting, if that's what you need. I do think you should take our contributions very seriously on this, though.
yeah, I mean, I think the more brains we get working on on this, the better, right? Different perspectives, different language. The language I think we're talking about is specifically, would it be like a 1 or 2 sentences that you all would develop now? So what I asked you to email me or to have the commission on is language that specifically would be posted, would be on a sign if we went that route, like that language. I think the language we're talking about is we need like a sentence or two that's going to go in the staff report that's available to the public before the next meeting that says the commission's recommendation is to implement these methods. So I don't know if that, would it be something like the commission recommends that the shelter utilize a final plea program, kennel signage, and XYZ to promote that there are at-risk animals.
Okay, so we'll get that to you, but when's the cutoff for the agenda?
My sense is it needed to be developed tonight in person to be put on next month's agenda.
The agenda needs to be developed tonight?
The recommendation that's going to be motioned.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a couple different ideas. So I'm hearing that we formulate a recommendation tonight to give to staff. I think that's what you're referring to. But then I've also heard discussed the creation of an ad hoc committee. My understanding was that the creation of the ad hoc committee would then be to provide specific recommendations on verbiage and specific strategies. Maybe I misunderstood the purpose of the
So my understanding is that there's going to be a recommendation for a vote, for a motion to vote for next month. And in addition to that, an ad hoc will be created to start actually trying to map out and signage, what it looks like, work with the shelter is kind of some of the nitty-gritty things, but there is a request to work on putting together a recommendation to go to city council.
Yes, so the recommendation that you could come up with tonight can be I think what you suggested could work. It could, also get a little bit more specific, but it is the recommendation to City Council to pursue specific policy goals, I believe, is, if I'm understanding kind of the thrust of the discussion correctly. And then the ad hoc committee would then work to create specific procedures, specific language, specific aspects of the program and recommendations on implementation, and then present those recommendations of the ad hoc committee at a later point to this commission. Does that sound accurate?
Now, the question is, if the ad hoc committee is working, creating signage, et cetera, does it need to come back to this committee before being trialed at the shelter, in which case then we won't make it a formal ad hoc committee?
Yeah, so the ad hoc committee doesn't work directly with staff, although they can work with other community members and organizations and on their own meeting schedule. And they also can't deliberate on the ad hoc committee's work with other commission members until they bring their final report back to the full commission.
So that an informal committee can work with the shelter staff. Okay, so it's an
Yes.
informal committee that's wanted.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. All right. Commissioner Morris.
Thank you. So one of the things I'm conscious of is that Commissioner Hayes is not here, and she accepted sort of pulling this together, so it feels a little awkward to be putting it together without her present. A suggestion is that we let Commissioner Hayes pull her work group together and put language together on what a final plea/underdog program could look like at the shelter, and that we could discuss and vote on that at the next meeting. My caveat or question is, it's a vote for us to say, yes, we like it. It's not a vote that says this has to go all the way up to city council, because that's weeks to get it on their agenda, yada, yada. That this is like.
Point of order, that you're talking about two totally separate things. What Commissioner Bagley and Commissioner Benedict talked about is something that would go to city council.
Yeah.
Because the committee, informal committee with Commissioner Hayes, that will be something that is discussed in the commissioner comments and ideas. So right now, we're discussing whether or not there's a recommendation formulated to be voted on next week, or next month, to go to city council. That's what the request was from Commissioner Bagley and Commissioner Benedict.
So the work group would bring forward a proposed.
The work group is basically to start a pilot and work with the shelter staff to trial things. But the recommendation is something that would formally come out of this committee to city council.
It seems like two paths that are awkward, but I'm sure we can learn how it can unfold.
Commissioner Berga?
I did want to say that I know Julia has legislative language that she has put together on this, and that she works for the legislature, and that she writes legislation in her capacity at the Capitol. And I think she would be willing to, as quickly as she is able, to get something together and meet with whoever she needs to, so that this can go wherever it needs to go, so that it can be refined and figured out, so that there can be a vote on it next month.
So the question comes to you folks. How formal does the recommendation have to be? Does it have to be like legislative, like that it's implying, or making the policy goal of creating kennel cards, kennel marketing, social media? would that be enough for a vote for next month?
Yes, it does not have to be a specific drafted ordinance or anything of that nature. It can be recommending specific policy goals or guidelines, things of that nature.
Okay, so to summarize what our current discussions have been, this commission is looking at wanting to make a recommendation to go to city council for policy goals regarding the creation of at-risk marketing, including such things as kennel cards, kennel marketing, informational board identifying at-risk dogs or at-risk animals, and social media.
I'd say digital notification, maybe?
Digital notification.
That could be, because that implies websites and social media and a lot of different 24-hour pet watch and.
Does that seem consistent with what's been discussed here? All right, so that is going to be what we're looking for on the agenda next month as a recommendation to go to city council. Anything further that we need to do on our part to make that happen?
No, you've made the recommendation, so I think that works.
Yes. All right, very good. Moving on. Animal Care Services Monthly Report. Do we have any speakers?
Sure, I did want to,
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. We did want to discuss seniors,
Yeah.
senior animals.
so the chair brought up a great point in our meeting, is that those two categories don't necessarily overlap. So a senior animal may not be at any euthanasia risk, but it may have a harder time getting adopted than other animals, and the shelter environment in particular could be an extra bad place for a senior pet. So we thought it would be a good idea to maybe have a little bit of a side conversation about ideas. Maybe the ideas overlap somewhat with what we've talked about already, but marketing ideas for those senior animals specifically. If anyone has ideas.
Commissioner Garcia.
Hey, I know we've talked about this for quite a while. There were some volunteers that were kind of interested in something like that. We did a adoption event at a senior home 5 or 6 months ago, where a lot of the folks there have senior animals. You can't, it's a little hard for them to have puppies and kittens and things like that. So that's where we're kind of thinking, hey, wouldn't it be cool to have like a senior to senior program, where you match senior animals with senior citizens and or homes that just are interested in adopting a senior animal. So I think we've kind of talked about this a little bit before, kind of started some sort of program. Maybe it could even be some sort of a volunteer-run program. It seems like at first it might start outside of small, but just something to kind of play around with and see where we can get with that. But I really am interested in that type of a program there.
Yeah, I love that idea. The only challenge I see with it may need to be limited to small dogs. I don't know if in senior homes specifically they may have weight restrictions. I think even our small senior dogs, I think, get scooped up pretty quick. Those small dogs, especially because the rental restrictions are quite popular. But I think that'd be a great thing to try if anyone would want to take on that project. To maybe, okay, great, we can coordinate, with some of our volunteers or fosters. Maybe just take 3 to start with or something, and maybe we can turn it into a social media post as well, like a cute, seniors meeting seniors. And then maybe something will come of it.
And that could be cats and or dogs, so.
Sure, yeah.
Commissioner Asquith?
I'd like to suggest that you did a great job summarizing the recommendation that we're going to be making, but I'd like to ask that we put at-risk senior dogs as part of that conversation so that it's not limited to, but inclusive of. Recognizing that seniors may be marketed differently, but having the conversation for including them in the at-risk.
Absolutely. Commissioner Berga?
I love that idea, because I think that is so hard for senior animals, cats and dogs, to find homes. And I guess I wonder, is there not currently a program for senior animals with Front Street? I mean, is that something we should maybe in an ad hoc committee be working on, it sounds like?
Yeah, I mean, they're sort of included with, you know, all the other programs, whether it's adoption specials or foster homes or whatnot, and, you know, they have discounted fees, but there's not, you know, a special, you know, special things that we're doing specifically for seniors on the marketing front.
And one last question regarding social media. Do you do Facebook buys
Like ads?
or ads?
We have experimented with it before. We've done it for adoption events and fundraising. We've tried. We haven't had a lot of success with it. I have, you know, I kind of put the campaigns together. I'm not an ads expert. We've always been able, we're one of the few types of pages that can still get away with organic posting without paying because everyone loves animals. But there are some specific areas of interest that I'm interested in for Facebook ads. They're a little bit off topic, but related to lost pets. Commissioner Barragan and I met briefly a couple weeks ago. He's very interested. He's done Facebook ads in his career. So again, leveraging the talent. And
Why with real estate, it works.
yeah. And his specific interest was, we had talked about marketing to our Spanish-speaking communities. I think that's a huge area of potential for both return to owners and adoption. So I'm really excited that he's going to be kind of expressed interest in heading that. I don't want to commit him to anything. He's not in his chair, but expressed interest in heading up. But yes, that's a possibility.
Any other commissioners? On seniors. So I will add seniors to the recommendation. And then I will happily forward that to you guys after the meeting. Right. Now, moving on to, unless you had anything else, Ryan, before moving on to the manager report. Are there any speakers?
I do not have any speaker slips for this item, no.
All right, very good. All right, presentation.
All right, this should be pretty quick. Famous last words. So I see it here. There it is. Okay. No, that's not going to work. There we go. I think I'm fighting the fact that I'm getting to the age where I need glasses, and I'm resisting as long as I can, but I can't deny it anymore. This is our first month looking backwards at statistics after a completed month. So we're looking at February 2026. So I don't know that you want me to go through all of these numbers, but you know, just a general intake: 150 cats, 358 dogs. We're about to see that cat number go up significantly. With this beautiful weather means beautiful kittens. Total, let's see, what else would be? So 80 cat adoptions, 173 dog adoptions. Oh, we do have transfer numbers. So this can be found on our website. So I can make a note to send you some instructions for how to navigate our website stats. You can play with all sorts of different years and months, and it's pretty cool. But it looks like we had no transfers for cats and 20 transfers for dogs. Overall live release rate, 87%. Cat live release rate, 75%. Dog live release rate, 92%. Keep in mind, this is factoring in our strep zoo outbreak where we reduced our dog intake guidelines. So that's going to play into that number for sure. I also, oops, that's not the right. Here we go. Too many buttons. I also thought it'd be fun to just include a fun story from each month. So I want to credit our amazing public information coordinator, Andrea, for this very extensive pro-level Valentine's campaign. So she created a sort of a Tinder, basically sort of swipe through post on Instagram. We did a post where we created all these Valentines, and people could come and pick them up and hand them out. And then in coordination with our also amazing volunteer team, we kind of put on this, you're probably familiar with our Doggy Day Out program, but we just did a special event for, if you don't have a date on Valentine's Day, we have something better for you. So a lot of dogs got out that day. It was a nice special day, and this is a dog that was adopted from people taking the dog out that day. Let's see, updates for you. Let's see. One of these. Okay, I mentioned TikTok. Okay, policies and procedures. So we are moving through the process. We actually just had interviews today. We're down to 2 vendors. We had interviews today with one, interviews on Friday with the other. So next week, we'll probably be moving to the next steps of that. Assistant Manager Jasso, I'll pause here because I don't want to forget what you wanted to talk about, but I'm remembering it now. So jump in.
Sure, I just wanted to take the opportunity to give you an update on the recruitment for animal care manager. I believe that recruitment went live yesterday or day before and closes on April the 7th. It is national recruitment being handled by Wendy Brown Incorporated, which is a firm that we use, one of several firms we use for unique recruitments, particularly for mid, upper, and executive leadership management at the City of Sacramento. And they're used actually extensively on the West Coast in general. So I think we can share that link and all the information associated to everyone on the commission if we haven't already. And we are hopeful that lightning strikes and we are able to attract some really good candidates and ultimately select a very good candidate to lead the animal care operations. So,
thank you. Other staffing updates. We have 3 animal control officers in backgrounds. One has passed backgrounds, and then there's 3 more in backgrounds. Once those 4, assuming they get through backgrounds, come through, we will be fully staffed on the animal control side for the first time in a while. Fully staffed doesn't mean fully trained. There's a huge training process as well. My dream is fully staffed and fully trained one day. We will also be recruiting soon for a dog foster coordinator. If you would like to reach out to your networks about that. I'm not sure when that's going to post. I have a customer service rep starting in a couple weeks, so my team will be fully staffed, which I'm super excited about. And then we're actively recruiting for 2 animal care technicians, and I think we're doing interviews for a registered vet tech, if we haven't already done them. I mentioned the TikTok. The poll, Mr. Vanderlyn, I think we determined that the best way to do it would be in person, just to make sure there's no Brown Act issues, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so definitely something we're interested in doing. I had hoped to do that, so I'm sort of being asked to try to get these agenda items as in advance as possible to meet all the deadlines and get all the documents uploaded. And so I'm really eager to do this. I was kind of planning on doing it next meeting. It seems like this item is kind of urgent. I know we have to vote on you have to vote on the dog ordinance too. So we have a lot of things we want for the next agenda. So we're going to have to kind of prioritize there. I think I have a pretty good sense for the highest priorities. But I'm hoping to get the poll so that we can again have like numbers behind that, so I know for sure how everyone feels and what the priorities are. And then the general kennel improvements, I got an update today that finalizing the contract for a campus-wide kennel repair scope and prepping the construction contract to present to council for approval. So it looks like we're the next step in the kennel improvements, which is one of the big items, is supposed to be coming to council soon. So that is the main update on that project. I think that is all the updates I have for you.
Great. Commissioners, Commissioner Morris.
Thanks for those updates. I actually wanted to make a comment towards Manager Jasso, which is, I know that you just described that there's a recruitment to replace the city shelter manager, and you said the
The animal care.
Animal care, thank you, I never can get the title right. The Animal Care Services Manager, and that recruitment is open until April 7th, is what you said?
I believe it's April the 7th, is that right, Matt? Yes.
So a question / suggestion would be that someone from the city manager's office assumes the interim manager role. Given that Ryan has a full-time job as communications coordinator and additional role with the activities that have been discussed about communications related to pilots, et cetera, and given that there have been some a variety of concerns about the shelter, it seems like it might be really thoughtful for the city manager office to lean in and take a role as the interim manager and relieve or become more educated about some of the, or informed about some of the day-to-day activities, and not necessarily put a current staff member into that position and subject to some of the challenges that go with that position. That's a suggestion / comment from me personally.
Sure, and I definitely appreciate the endorsement of having someone from the city manager's office. I think the thing we have to balance is, as you said, Ryan certainly does have a full-time job, et cetera. That challenge kind of goes around the city in terms of it. I will assure you of this, though, that certainly in the recent months, weeks, I've been trying to lean in to animal care, not just because I think it deserves it from a subject matter perspective. It's also because of my personal love for animals and wanting to see that. Many of you didn't see, but my partner, who came in briefly, I had to give him some keys, is an active volunteer at Front Street, and it was done. So one of the things I've made a commitment to is I've been working with Ryan, and you can't see Matt Hurdle in the back, who's the Deputy Director of the Department of Community Development, have been meeting regularly on all things animal care, and I will continue to do that, even beyond the point where we have an animal care manager identified and on board. So you have that commitment from the city manager's office that we are definitely going to remain involved. On the practical of whether have the capacity to become the interim animal care manager, we just have to balance that with kind of needs across the city. So, but thank you for the suggestion.
Commissioner Berga.
I just had a couple questions that I don't know if you can answer regarding the 2 vendors that were hired for the SOPs. Can you share who they are, or that you're considering for the SOPs?
I doubt that I can. Carson, do you have any input on that?
I mean, are you in contract negotiations yet, or you're just considering different
We're still in
options?
interviews.
I mean, ultimately, I think that would be up to you to talk about who you're considering or not, just depending on whether you think that there would be some sort of chilling effect involved in sharing it. I mean, really, it's kind of would be up to staff at that point. I don't know if you're taking up the lead in those negotiations or interviewing. But also given the fact that maybe interviews are still outstanding, that might be a consideration. So I would leave it up to staff.
If I could jump in here, I do know that the norm from our procurement practices across the city is that typically we would not share that information, certainly during number one, we haven't even selected anyone yet, nor have we interviewed them. It is not uncommon for the city to get outside input on some of those as we move forward, and that may be a possibility, but typically we keep it confidential, at least until we're at a certain point in any negotiations and selection.
And the reason why I ask is because there's a lot of controversy in different so-called experts in the animal welfare world. And some in particular that many of us feel have pushed illegal reduced intake programs that have caused the current crisis that we see. And there's a lot of different alignments out there. And so if it would be possible, you know, I would just be concerned that if there's a firm that's hired to do the SOPs, that they're independent and they don't have those kinds of affiliations. And maybe they don't because they're more aligned with you know, doing the standard operating procedures, but there's a lot of nuances in SOPs as it pertains to shelters that I think are really critical. So I just thought I'd mention that, number one. And then the recruitment firm, again, that you said for the director position?
Wendy Brown and INC.
Wendy Brown?
Wendy Brown,
Okay.
with an I.
Okay, thank you. And then, when is Director Zimmerman's last day? We're talking about interim people being there, and I'm just curious when he's,
I believe his last official day is the 20th, and we were kind of in discussions of kind of reviewing who might be qualified to serve as an interim. And ideally, that's going to be someone who has subject matter expertise and familiarity with the shelter. So, but we're trying to also just make sure we balance capacity across the organization.
so when you say the 20th
Of this month.
okay, so March 20th of this month, and then you are considering potentially an independent interim or someone in staff, or?
At this stage, we are not looking for an independent outside the agency, partly because hopefully we are endeavoring with the recruitment, and once again, this is knocking on wood and hoping that we get a good cadre of candidates to limit this interim period to not more than 90 days, kind of 3 months, kind of. So once again, we implore your assistance in getting the notice out to as many of your networks as possible. We think Front Street is absolutely a profession of love, and so I think many people are have an amazing experience there because it's a challenging environment. But if you care for animals, there's I think empowering place to be than Front Street. So,
Thank you.
And Commissioner Virgo, I'll just jump in. I think I know who you're concerned may be selected, and I don't believe that either of the vendors we're considering would meet your concerns. Yeah.
Commissioner Benedict.
Yes, my comment kind of goes back to Commissioner Virga's concern about the SOPs, because I think many of us, like she said, are concerned that the SOPs may include some illegal practices such as this, the reduced intake. Is there a way that we can review, will we be able to review the SOPs and make recommendations before they're adopted?
Yes, in the request for proposals, there's specifically an item that would require the vendor to give a presentation on the SOPs and receive feedback from the commission.
And then would we, in turn, be able to make recommendations to remove or change and take a vote on that sort of thing when it happens?
I mean, certainly, feedback and recommendations. Again, we're talking about like informal versus formal. So, I mean, as far as I'm aware, the commission can make recommendations on any subject potentially. Is there a specific reason they couldn't?
Pursuant to their subject matter jurisdiction. It also would just depend on the nature of the SOP. If the SOP was primarily, for example, related to the jurisdiction of like labor relations, issues with unions, certain types of policies related to that, that might not fall within the scope of the commission, whereas other policies and practices that more closely aligned with the commission's ordinance and subject matter jurisdiction would be appropriate to comment and recommend on. So it would just depend on the individual policy.
Thank you.
Commissioner Berga.
Since you are here, Assistant City Manager Jasso, I just thought I'd mention that Ms. Bagley and Snell had already started on SOPs because earlier in the year at the commission meetings, that's what the plan was supposed to be. And I think many of us have a real interest in them. They're critical to the well-functioning, of a shelter. And one thought would be, would it be possible for us before the presentation to get a preemptive copy, those of us that may be interested in the SOPs, just so we can evaluate them and give our insights regarding the SOPs. That would be a request I think that many of us might be interested in, especially our new member who has a lot of experience in sheltering. I think I would love for her to take a look at them.
I'm not opposed to it. Let us take a look at, see how that might work. And I'm just thinking off the top of my head, that might actually form a good basis for an ad hoc committee on a very limited basis, time-wise, but let's have that conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My other thought would be, since they had already started drafting some items, is once the vendor's selected, submit what has been already formulated as a basis for, offering it up.
Yeah, there's no such thing as bad feedback, so I'm not opposed to it, but to be determined. Yeah.
All right, seeing no more speakers, thank you for the report. We've got, next on the agenda is Commissioner comments, ideas, and questions. So this would be the place I'm going to suggest that Commissioner Hayes, who agreed to lead a informal committee to work with the shelter on at-risk. Anyone else who's interested should, we can take names now, or you can contact her directly, so that we do not have any Brown Act issues. There's a maximum of 6 people that can work on this. So if you want to volunteer now, I will have you forward the names, or you can just contact her directly. But let us formulate a informal subcommittee to work with the shelter. And I do appreciate anyone who's willing to put their time in and help. Commissioner Morse.
The follow-up log, can we add a couple things to the follow-up log at this point?
This is absolutely the
This is the
spot.
time to do this, okay. And I'd like to add an item related to last year's ad hoc committee on dog adoptions. A few of us, I'm looking at Commissioner Bagley and Garcia, we participated in an ad hoc committee on dog adoptions. Several recommendations came from that work, but the next steps on implementing those recommendations seem to have fallen through the cracks. And so I'm hoping that there can be some further pursuit of implementation of recommendations. And the recommendations were things like targeted marketing strategies tied to neighborhoods with historically high adoption rates, post-adoption support recommendations. There's a whole host of things that came out of that ad hoc committee, which were in last year's annual report, and it sort of stopped there. So hoping we can put that on the log as a next step of following up on some of the things we worked on.
So added as a discussion item, and it doesn't seem like that would be something that a staff presentation would be necessary for. If anything, it actually would seem like a commissioner presentation.
Yeah.
In that the commissioners have the
Yeah.
information. So just for clarifying for the log on how much need of staff time is required. Okay, duly noted.
Another one would be returning to discussions that were presented in 2024 about identifying an 8-acre site for a new shelter. That came out of an extensive needs assessment that was conducted, and the idea of either the city identifying an 8-acre-ish, 7-8-acre-ish site that a new shelter could be located on. There was one effort to pursue that, and it was property that had encumbrances on it, so you couldn't build on it. So it's like, okay, what's next in terms of looking for an 8-acre site that the city, i.e. there's 102 acres in Meadowview? I don't know. I don't know if the Blue Diamond Factory has 8 acres. I don't know, but could we reinvigorate the discussion about either a city property? I'm looking at City Manager Jasso to help us back with this, but a piece of city property, and/or if some of us who maybe work in the real estate world might know somebody who might have 8 acres to donate to the city for $1 or something, whether we might find a private individual who could help us with some sort of acreage. So that's a second thing to go on the log. And I've kind of drafted some language for the log, but I can forward that later. The other thing is some discussion about a capital campaign to raise funds for a new shelter. Ideas have been floated regarding either a bond or a parcel tax or private fund development. The past chair had taken some leadership on bond and parcel tax. We don't have his input at this point, but I wouldn't like to lose that as a commission effort to look at how we might do some sort of a capital campaign, fund development around the potential for a new shelter. Just as a related note, these things were in prior annual reports, which were approved by PNPE, forwarded to City Council, and approved by City Council. So these are plans or activities that were previously approved by City Council to look for new property, to look at capital campaign, and working on the dog adoption methodologies.
Okay, very good to keep it back on the radar, or put it back on the radar since they're not there. Commissioner Verga.
And maybe Brian knows the answer to this question. But I believe it was on last month's agenda. It was mentioned, I think in the manager's report, that that 500,000 was approved for spay-neuter.
500,000 is in the proposed budget, the city, will be in the city manager. Now, council ultimately has to adopt that budget, and there are a lot of competing priorities, so.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get clarification on. So there'll be hearings then at the city council regarding that proposal, I would imagine.
That's correct, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, community development will be up in front of the city council for presentation. I think it's next week, Matt, the 17th. It's a 2 o'clock meeting. So, there are other departments as well, so if you
So
come, you
this
may.
wouldn't go to a committee first? This is going to go right to the city council?
So
This-
what we are in the process of doing is all the departments are presenting to city council our recommendations for a budget. The council will have to deliberate that budget proposal in totality and see if there are other things that they.
Sure.
So, but at this stage, it's just presentation for
Okay.
council and discussion that counts, feedback from council.
And in your opinion, would it be valuable if some commissioners showed up to try to say why it's so important?
I think it's always valuable to have advocacy on any issue, so.
Okay, I would be interested in knowing when that was.
So it is Tuesday, the 17th.
Okay.
City council begins at 2 o'clock. There are, I don't remember what order CDD is, their second. What is, sorry, Matt, what is before that? So I know it is not police or fire, which tend to be the two longest, so I'm gonna, but, yeah, it may be youth and parks, which will probably be a long item, so. So, you know.
Commissioner Garcia?
So would this be the time to talk about some of the things on the log that could be removed, just to kind of
Absolutely.
clean it up a little bit? Some of the things like, that are already happening, like Ryan gave some information on the kitten connection, so can we take that off? And I think you were talking about the COVID stuff as well.
Correct.
And maybe the shelter's manager report in advance.
Correct, I have that one on my list too. Yeah.
Okay, going down the line here. I'm not sure on this one, the dog foster guidelines, there's some here. I don't know if that's adequate or not. It looks like it's been on here since January as well. I don't know if that's what folks were looking for. Connections done. And some of these things, like you say, can be done with a group of people or a committee. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a big discussion at a meeting where it's going to be put on an agenda and maybe takes place as something else we'd rather discuss.
What else was there?
So just to circle back, for your list, my list combined, because I didn't track who said who, but I had additional spay-neuter events, shelter manager report in advance, pre-COVID capacity, cat euthanasia list, because that was something we discussed earlier to be removed, kitten connection, and then one other one I had as potential is animals not on the rescue list, because rescue, we have somewhere else. There anyone have any problem with those being removed?
Did you just say animals not on the rescue list will be removed?
That was a question, if it was resolved, because it was information Ryan's going to be presenting on rescues and policy, rescue policy.
And if
But
it's
we
going
can
to be
leave
on
it on
final
there if
plea,
you
then
prefer.
that would be great too, you know?
Say that again?
I said animals not on the rescue list. What that was about was that about final plea. Why final plea was important is because not all animals are on the rescue list. So I think it would be covered, that item would be covered.
Okay, so, Commissioner Asquith. And just a time check, we have 9 minutes and we still have the public to speak. Oh.
I have a question for Assistant City Manager Jasso. If Manager Zimmerman is unavailable next week to present in front of City Council the need for the $500,000 in spay-neuter money, who will do that in his place?
So all the departments are represented by their directors. So in the case of CDD, it will be Tom Pace, who's the Director of Community Development, of which animal. So. And there'll still be representation of individual divisions within that. So there will be animal care representation there, as there is building, planning, et cetera. They will, but typically they would only be coming up and speaking if there's a specific question that for some reason the director could not answer, so.
Commissioner Benedict?
Yes, I just would like to add, or re-add, I guess, Commissioner Bagley's shelter law presentation, which was not on the follow-up log. No, I think we should put that on. Okay.
At the start when we saw that it was missing.
Okay, thank you.
Could I jump in and ask a clarifying question? And apologies, I knew that you wanted two clarifications, actually. One is for the return to owner, or let's see. Redemption policy. I had in my notes that you felt that a presentation was not required. Were you including, I know you probably meant staff presentation not required, which I agree with as long as I can, convey the policy. But did you want to do a presentation for that item? No. Okay.
I think we would benefit hearing from you. I don't think it requires a staff presentation. I think your input, it is important, and then I think the discussion that commissioners could have would be incentivizing the first redemption. We know, or we should know the law on the second and subsequent redemptions.
Okay. And then the other one, and apologies, I didn't have this in my notes, a general presentation on laws and codes related to sheltering.
Yes.
Do you feel like, I don't know, obviously there's a lot of things that could be there. Do you have any specifics on the things you'd like to discuss? Would you be able to share them so I could put them on the log? Okay.
I would have a PowerPoint, a clean PowerPoint, without my opinions on it. But yes, I do have a long. Yeah.
Okay.
I can send you language.
Yeah, I was just.
It's current city ordinances and state law that work together that reflect what is legal in sheltering versus violative.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Morris.
Just request to remove the very last item, the site improvement review. Commissioner Berrigan and I actually chatted about that, and he's comfortable with understanding how those improvements came to be determined.
Okay, duly noted. Commissioner Verga?
I would say before that's removed, because that's just a lot of money that's going to interim improvements. And Leah, if we could just meet even at the shelter and you could walk me through them, that may take care of any concerns that I have, but that's a lot of money. And that's an old building. And I think safety concerns for animals and people should be the priority there. But I also know, having done project management for very many construction projects with old buildings and old houses, you pull one little thread and you can cause a bigger problem. So I would just say before, I would just love to be able to walk through with you to see what those interim improvements involve before it's taken off the follow-up log, please. Thank you.
Any other comments or requests? All right, seeing none. Do we have any public comments?
I do not have any speakers for public comments, matters not on the agenda.
All right. Yeah, so that concludes today's agenda. I want to thank everyone for your participation, and the meeting is adjourned.
That done,
Yeah, you got